Hey guys, welcome back to the channel Silent Ruptor. Many of you were requesting for the Affinity Chaos. So after completing Necromancer of the Shadows I will resume Affinity Chaos, with that I will continue Shadow Slave, so guys stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment on this video. React. Evan was stunned when he heard Azroth's words and wanted to ask what was going on, but before he could ask anything, Azroth completely disappeared and a silver light covered his body. Evan looked at the silver light that enveloped him and, in the next second, he disappeared from the tomb. Roar, roar, roar. Damn, just how many creatures are there? Baphomet shouted in frustration as he killed eldritch creatures one after another, their roars echoing madly around him. The black void space around him was filled with tens of thousands of dead bodies, and as the bodies of eldritch creatures piled up, the concentration of eldritch energy in the void increased with each passing second. Although the current amount of eldritch energy was nothing to Baphomet, a peak-ranked 6-core evolver, he was still a little worried because he didn't know how many days he would have to stay in the void space before Eldrakar could find traces of the passage leading to Utopia. He feared that if they had to remain in this void space for an extended period, it would become very difficult due to the rapidly increasing concentration of eldritch energy. Roar. Suddenly, Baphomet heard a loud roar and felt the aura of a mid-level rank 5 eldritch creature approaching him. Another rank 5 creature. Just how many are there? Baphomet grumbled when he sensed the creature's aura. He punched in front of him with full power, sending a wave of demonic energy to clear out the eldritch creatures in his path. As the eldritch creatures came into contact with the demonic energy, they instantly exploded, and their eldritch energy got mixed with the energy filling the void, increasing its density even more. After killing the eldritch creatures in front of him, Baphomet looked back and saw the rank 5 eldritch creature rushing towards him. The creature had a 3-meter-tall, thin humanoid body, 4 dark brown eyes on its face, a potbelly, and 2 arms bulging with muscles, contrasting its thin body. As Baphomet looked at the creature, he narrowed his eyes. He wasn't afraid of a rank 5 creature since he could kill it easily, but he was surprised to feel that this eldritch creature was absorbing the eldritch energy from the surrounding void space, slowly increasing its aura and becoming stronger by absorbing the energy released by other eldritch creatures upon their deaths. Initially, Baphomet wanted to kill it immediately to prevent it from becoming a future threat after absorbing all the energy in the void. However, after a moment of consideration, he decided to let the creature absorb the eldritch energy. Although the current eldritch energy level in the void was not alarming, it would definitely pose a problem in the future. By letting this creature absorb the eldritch energy, Baphomet thought he could solve this problem. Even if the eldritch creature's level increased after absorbing the energy, he wasn't concerned as he could handle it even if the creature became a rank 6 monster. As Baphomet contemplated letting the eldritch creature absorb more energy, a strange energy, or more precisely, the power of laws suddenly enveloped the void space. Baphomet's face changed when he felt the power of the laws covering the void space, and he looked around in confusion, wondering what was happening. As he scanned the area, he noticed the void space was shrinking, replaced by a black energy that seemed capable of engulfing everything. What's this energy, and why can I feel a strong power of law in it? Baphomet muttered with a serious look on his face as a sense of foreboding rose in his heart. While Baphomet was observing the black power engulfing the void, a bright purple light flashed beside him, and Eldrakar appeared with a grave look on his face. Seeing Eldrakar's grave expression, Baphomet quickly asked if he knew what the black power engulfing the void was. The power of nihility, Eldrakar said in a serious voice. This void space was formed due to the tomb of the ancient, but now that the space of the tomb has collapsed, the void space that was formed due to the tomb can't sustain itself and is returning to nihility, or in other words, nothingness. Baphomet was stunned when he heard Eldrakar, and he used his spiritual senses to scan the black power that was rapidly covering the void. But to his shock, the moment his spiritual power touched the black energy, it disappeared from existence as if it had never existed. Damn, Baphomet cursed, feeling a stinging sensation in his soul when his spiritual power was devoured by the power of nihility, causing a mild headache. At the same time, the soul injury he had sustained because of Azroth resurfaced and he couldn't suppress it. Although Baphomet wanted to curse Azroth's 7 generations for inflicting such a strange injury to his soul, he knew this wasn't the time, so he ignored the pain coming from his soul and looked at Eldrakar. What should we do next? He asked, knowing that the black energy was not normal. As the void shrinked and the bodies of the eldritch creatures came into contact with the power of nihility, the dead bodies that filled the void immediately disappeared, indicating that even the eldritch energy was no match against the power of nihility. I do not have any good solution. Once the power of nihility engulfs the entire void, it will be impossible for us to find any traces of the passage that leads to Utopia, Eldracar said while shaking his head and tried to think of a solution that could save them. As he pondered, Eldracar suddenly remembered the half-golden and half-black pillar of light he had seen inside the tomb. He recalled that when he had looked at the pillar using his void vision skill, he had noticed that the pillar of light was present even inside the void. Maybe we can survive if we go to the void space where I saw that pillar, Eldracar thought and immediately told Baphomet about it. Upon hearing Eldracar, Baphomet immediately agreed as he knew they had no other choice. After deciding to go there, they wasted no time and quickly moved in the direction where Eldracar had seen the pillar of light. Including Baphomet himself, there were a total of 5 ranked 6 core evolvers in the Gehenna Empire. Among these 5, Baphomet was the only peak ranked 6 core evolver, while one was mid-level and the other 3 were beginner-level ranked 6 core evolvers. Currently, the entire Gehenna Empire was in a state of emergency because of the mid-level ranked 6 light dragon that was rapidly moving towards the capital of the empire. The news of the destruction of the Hellgate Fortress had already spread throughout the Gehenna Empire, and other major forces, who were paying close attention to the light dragon that came out of the tomb of the ancient also knew about the destruction of the Hellgate Fortress. The capital of the Gehenna Empire, where Baphomet lived, was naturally guarded by him. However, since he was currently trapped in the tomb, it was impossible for him to stop the light dragon, which was about to reach the capital of his empire. Moreover, the other 4 ranked 6 core evolvers of the Gehenna Empire had their own tasks and were not in the capital. After receiving the news that a mid-level ranked 6 dragon was heading towards the capital and that Baphomet was not there, the beginner-level ranked 6 demon, who was stationed outside of the Shadow Realm and was closest to the Demon Empire, immediately decided to head back. While the beginner-level ranked 6 demon was coming back, the light dragon finally reached the capital of the Demon Empire and roar. It roared loudly, announcing its presence to all the demons in the capital. The demons of the capital had naturally received the news about the light dragon when it destroyed the Hellgate Fortress, so when the dragon arrived at the capital, they were prepared for it. The defense formation of the capital, which was more powerful than the Hellgate Fortress, was already activated. The entire capital was covered by the defense barrier, and the high-level attacking cannons and other security weapons were all aimed at the dragon. When the ranked 6 light dragon arrived right outside the capital, the demons didn't immediately attack. Instead, the demon in charge of the capital's security flew towards the dragon. "You filthy beast, why are you attacking our empire? Do you know?" Roar. Before the peak rank 5 demon who approached the dragon could finish speaking, the light dragon roared loudly and used the innate skill of the dragon race, Dragon's Prestige. The moment the light dragon used its skill, a pressure that forced all the demons to kneel before it erupted from its body, and most of the demons dropped to the ground. However, the pressure that emanated from the dragon's body didn't last long because, as soon as the pressure invaded the barrier that covered the capital, the defensive runes engraved on it lit up, and the pressure the demons were feeling disappeared. The peak rank 5 demon who had gone to talk to the light dragon sighed in relief when he saw this and was glad that he did not leave the formation while talking to the dragon, otherwise, he might have already been killed by the light dragon. "Why are you attacking our empire? The relationship between the Dragon Islands and the Gehenna Empire has always been good. Do you want to start a war between our forces?" The demon spoke in a cold voice, signaling the other demons to prepare the attacking cannon and launch an attack in case the dragon did anything suspicious. The eyes of the light dragon flashed with disdain when it heard the rank 5 demon, and its majestic voice rang out throughout the demon capital. "The puny demon emperor of yours is already dead. He was killed by our god, the void dragon Eldracar. Do you think without your emperor you can stop dragons from taking over your empire? If you all want to live, then surrender to the Dragon Islands, or you will all perish just like your demon emperor. Forget about the rank 5 demon and the residents of the Demon Empire's capital." Even the people of other factions who were paying close attention to the Demon Empire after receiving the news about the light dragon were shocked when they heard the dragon's words. The face of the peak rank 5 demon turned red with anger upon hearing the light dragon. The demons of the Gehenna Empire held great respect for Baphomet as he was the strongest demon. So, when the rank 5 demon heard what the dragon said, it was so angry that it wanted to tear the dragon to pieces. But the rank 5 demon knew it didn't have enough strength to kill the dragon, so he took a deep breath and said in a cold voice, "Do you think we are stupid? Our emperor is the strongest person in this world. There is no way he can die." The light dragon sneered loudly upon hearing the demon and said in a voice full of disdain, You must have the soul lamp of your puny emperor. Why don't you go and check if it is still intact or not? Hearing the dragon's disdainful voice, the rank 5 demon furrowed his eyebrows. He naturally didn't believe that Baphomet was dead, but after hearing the confident tone of the dragon, he started to get a bad feeling. Without altering his expression, the demon made some small gestures with his hand. When the vice commander of the capital's security noticed these gestures, he immediately understood what the peak rank 5 demon wanted and left in a hurry. Normally, the rank 5 demon wouldn't even consider the possibility that Baphomet was dead, but before leaving, Baphomet had informed the high-level demons that he was going with Eldracar to take care of some matters. So, after hearing the dragon say that it was Eldracar who killed Baphomet, the demon had no choice but to take it seriously. The vice commander of the security was also a rank 5 demon, so within seconds, the demon who was arguing with the dragon heard his voice. And when he heard what the vice commander said, his eyes widened in shock and his blood turned cold. The soul lamp of the emperor is broken. The peak rank 5 demon couldn't believe, or rather, he refused to believe what the vice commander of the demons just said. Baphomet, their emperor was dead. Nonsense. Baphomet was not an ordinary rank 6 core evolver. He was one of the 5 monarchs, and his strength was far above that of other rank 6 core evolvers. Even though Eldracar was strong, in the eyes of the demons, it was impossible for him to kill Baphomet. The vice commander had directly transmitted his voice into the peak rank 5 demon's mind, so others didn't hear that Baphomet's soul lamp was broken. But looking at the demon's pale face, experienced onlookers could guess that something significant must have happened and that what the light dragon said might be true. When the people of other factions, who were watching the scene from a distance saw the peak rank 5 demon's pale face, they immediately informed the leaders of their factions about what was happening. Upon receiving this information, all the factions were thrown into chaos. However, most of the top-level leaders didn't believe that Baphomet was dead. Upon receiving this information, all the factions were thrown into chaos. However, most of the top-level leaders didn't believe that Baphomet was dead. Others might not know about Baphomet's strength, but all the top leaders knew that besides being powerful, the demon monarch was also very cunning. They couldn't imagine him being killed by Eldracar. Although most people thought he wasn't dead, there were also some who believed the dragon wasn't lying. The reason for this was the destruction of the tomb of the ancient. According to the people who came out of the tomb, before it collapsed, they felt powerful auras that were even stronger than the mid-level ranked 6 dragon. While most people didn't recognize the auras that caused the tomb's destruction, some of the demons and dragons who came out of the tomb recognized that 2 of the auras belonged to Baphomet and Eldracar. Additionally, top-level individuals like Noel Walter and others had seen Baphomet and Eldracar a few times in the past. So, although they were not 100% certain, they also felt the auras belonged to Eldracar and Baphomet and that they were fighting in the tomb. Though, whether they were fighting each other or another being, they didn't know. But the fact that Noel and others felt Baphomet and Eldracar's auras, coupled with the destruction of the tomb and the peak rank 5 demon's pale face, made many people think the light dragon was telling the truth and that Baphomet was dead. Upon receiving the news that Baphomet's soul lamp was broken, the peak rank 5 demon's mind stopped working for a moment. He came back to his senses only when he heard the arrogant voice of the dragon. Now that your emperor is dead, you demons better surrender to the Dragon Islands, or else. When the peak rank 5 demon heard the light dragon's threatening words, his eyes flashed with murderous intent and he shouted loudly. You filthy beast, do you think you can fool us? Since you lizards want a war, then we will give it to you. The peak rank 5 demon signaled the demons who were controlling the defense formation to attack. All the demons were already angry after hearing the dragon, so the moment they received the signal, all the magic cannons and attack formations lit up simultaneously. Since it was the capital of the Gehenna Empire, it was obvious that the defense formation was made to hold even against ranked 6 core evolvers. When the magic cannons and the attack formations were activated, a dangerous aura filled the surroundings and even the people of the other factions who were watching from a distance backed away. The mid-level ranked 6 dragon also felt a lethal threat from the magic cannons and the attack formations and its giant face turned serious. The demons could have attacked the dragon the moment it showed up outside the capital, but using magic cannons and formations that can even threaten a ranked 6 core evolver is not cheap. If possible, the demons wanted to avoid using the magic cannons and attack formations, but now that they had decided to use them, they didn't hold back one bit and activated all the cannons and formations. Feeling the threat, the light dragon roared loudly and a blinding golden light erupted from its giant body, forming a transparent shield in front of it. At the same time, hundreds of rapidly spinning small magic circles appeared behind it. Fire! The peak rank 5 demon didn't care about the shield and the magic circle and shouted with bloodshot eyes. The moment the demon shouted, boom, 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 booming sounds echoed throughout the capital of the Gehenna Empire, and tens of magic cannons in attack formation released their attack towards the dragon. The dragon showed a solemn look upon seeing the attacks released by the cannons in attack formations, and the hundreds of magic circles that were spinning behind it shot beams of light to clash against the attack. The dragon's attack and the attack released by the defense formation collided in an instant, and boom, 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 blinding explosions shook the area within tens of thousands of kilometers. The outer area of the demon capital was completely destroyed, and everything turned into dust. The power of the attacks released by the formation and the magic cannons could even threaten a peak rank 6 core revolver, so the light beams released by the light dragon were unable to stop the attacks of the formation and were destroyed after a single clash. The attacks of the formation continued to move forward and struck the light shield in front of the dragon, destroying it instantly. Although the shield was destroyed, the power of the attacks released by the formation was greatly weakened after colliding with the light beams in the shield. The attacks of the formation struck the dragon's body and pushed it a few hundred meters back. Some of its scales shattered because of the attacks, but there was no significant damage. However, what people didn't notice was that the body of the dragon slowly started to turn transparent, as if it would soon disappear. The demons were stunned when they saw the light dragon stop the attacks of the formation with little difficulty and without sustaining any significant injuries. They were about to attack once again, but suddenly, another aura belonging to a beginner-level rank 6 core revolver enveloped the surroundings. The face of the rank 5 demon lit up when he felt the aura because he recognized it. Soon, a tall demon wearing black armor appeared in front of the dragon and looked at it with cold eyes. Finally, with the help of the defensive formation and Lord Rom, it shouldn't be difficult to kill this dragon, the peak rank 5 demon muttered, but the next second, he was shocked by the dragon's actions. Upon seeing the beginner level rank 6 demon, the dragon's eyes flashed with a strange light, and it shouted in a booming voice. The dragon god Eldrakar commanded me to either destroy the demon capital or make them surrender. Since you refused to submit to Dragon Islands, I will destroy your capital even if I have to die. The moment the dragon finished speaking, a violent aura erupted, and its body started to swell up. When the people, including the rank 6 demon, saw what the dragon was doing, their faces turned pale, and they all turned around to run away. But before they could run away, all hail the dragon god, Eldrakar. Victory to the Dragon Islands. They heard the mad voice of the light dragon, and the next second, boom, the rank 6 light dragon exploded, throwing the entire demon capital into chaos. Boom, the explosion caused by the self-destruction of a rank 6 dragon was no joke. The moment the dragon self-destructed, violent energy waves erupted outwards in all directions, wiping out everything in their path. The defensive barrier that covered the capital of the empire couldn't withstand the power of self-destruction, and cracks appeared all over it. The magic cannons that were part of the defensive barriers collapsed, and the attack formations shattered. Seeing the rapidly spreading cracks in the barrier, the faces of all the demons inside the capital turned pale. The demons in charge of the defensive formation increased the output of energy into the barrier to the maximum limit possible, but even then, crack, crack, the spiderweb-like cracks spreading on the barrier didn't stop, and the barrier became fragile like glass. In just a few seconds, under the horrified eyes of the demons, crack, a loud cracking sound echoed throughout the capital, and the barrier that covered the city collapsed. The moment the barrier collapsed, the violent energy waves engulfed the entire capital like a tsunami. The buildings of the capital exploded into dust, and the ground sank down. Although the barrier weakened the energy waves before it shattered, most of the demons below rank 2 immediately died upon coming into contact with the violent energy waves. The high-level demons tried to stop the energy waves that were destroying the capital, but the power generated upon the destruction of a mid-level rank 6 dragon was not something that could be easily handled. The most unlucky person was the beginner-level rank 6 demon who had just arrived to stop the dragon. Unlike the other demons, he was outside the barrier, so he had to face the violent energy waves head-on. When the dragon suddenly exploded, he was so shocked that he didn't even get the chance to put up a proper defense. Although he didn't die because of the rank 5 armor he was wearing, he was seriously injured and blown away thousands of kilometers by the energy waves. After crashing far away from the capital, the rank 6 demon immediately lost consciousness. Although he was alive, it was unknown how long he could survive without receiving proper treatment. The people of the other factions who were watching from a distance were also shocked by the sudden turn of events. When the dragon self-destructed, they tried to get away, but even though most of them were rank 4 or rank 5 core evolvers, they were still unable to escape the violent energy waves in time and were seriously injured. Some of the weaker people even died upon getting caught in the energy wave storm, and before their deaths, all of them regretted coming here to watch the show. Some of the people were even using artifacts to show a live broadcast of the event to the high-level members of their factions. Alistair, Winterclaw, Anastasia, Akasha, and others who were watching the event were also shocked by the sudden turn of events. No one expected the rank 6 dragon to go ahead and self-destruct. The words that the dragon spoke before self-destructing were still echoing in people's minds. All hail the dragon god, Eldracar. Victory to the Dragon Islands. Thinking about the words that the dragon spoke before its death, only 3 words came to people's minds. What the fuck? Wasn't this dragon too dedicated? Instead of a member of the dragon race, they felt as if the light dragon was a member of a secret cult that worshipped Eldracar. Even the dragons who were keeping a close eye on the event were stunned when they heard the last words that the dragon spoke before it self-destructed. All of them also greatly respected Eldracar, but it was the first time they saw someone so dedicated. All the rank 6 core evolvers have a certain amount of pride. After all, rank 6 was the highest level one could achieve. So even though the rank 6 dragons of the Dragon Islands respected Eldracar, they were not mad enough to self-destruct just to fulfill his orders. They were not sure if Eldracar really told the light dragon to destroy the capital of the Demon Empire or if Baphomet was really killed by him, but they all knew that this event was far from over. Now that the capital of the Demon Empire was completely obliterated by the light dragon, and who knows how many demons were killed after the self-destruction, they knew they would have to give a satisfactory answer to the demons, otherwise, war was inevitable. After all, the dragon caused chaos in the name of Eldracar, who was the ruler of the dragon race. All the people, whether they were the representatives of the factions who were greatly injured because of the dragon's self-destruction or the demons who survived the violent energy storm that nearly destroyed the entire capital, were looking at the destruction around them with blank expressions on their faces. Even those who were watching everything on the screen through the broadcast were stunned and didn't know what to say. Not far away from the people of the other factions, who were looking around blankly, Ashley, who was hidden using her space ability, also looked at everything with a solemn expression. Although dryads live in a hidden world, it doesn't mean they don't have an information network in Utopia. So when the light dragon emerged from the tomb, they immediately received news about it, and Sylvan sent Ashley to investigate. That was dangerous, Ashley thought inwardly while wiping cold sweat from her forehead. When the dragon self-destructed, she would have been seriously injured as well if she hadn't escaped the range of the violent energy using her teleportation skill. While looking at the destruction around her, Ashley held a crystal sphere in her hand that was broadcasting everything directly to the hidden world of the dryads. Sylvan, Alaric, and others were watching the screen with serious expressions. They all knew that because of this event, there was a very high chance that the long-lasting peace of Utopia would be broken. Just when Sylvan and the others were focused on the screen, they heard a light chuckle and saw Anastasia laughing with an amused look on her face. Seeing Anastasia, who was also a dragon, laughing after witnessing a dragon self-destruct, they all gave her a weird look. Anastasia, however, didn't care about the looks she was getting and her tense heart relaxed. It seems Master successfully solved the problem that arose in the tomb and even set the stage for the next play, she thought, but there was something that was bothering her. All the people who entered the tomb have already returned, but why is he not back yet? Anastasia thought, a hint of worry crossing her mind. Just as she was thinking, a white light flashed in the teleportation building where they stood, and a familiar aura filled the space. The light dragon was revived by Azeroth using the temporary resurrection skill. Normally, the revival effect of this skill lasts for 24 hours, but revival time is greatly reduced if the revived person uses too much of their power. The light dragon was a mid-level rank 6 core evolver, and because it used too much of its power, it was about to disappear after fending off the attack of the magic cannons and attack formations. Azeroth had instructed the light dragon to provoke the Demon Empire in the name of the Dragon Islands. So when the light dragon felt it would soon disappear, it didn't hesitate and decided to self-destruct to cause as much damage as possible. Because it was about to disappear, the energy released upon its self-destruction was actually much lower than that of a rank 6 core evolver's self-destruction. To become a rank 6 core evolver, one must create a world in their core. In other words, a rank 6 core evolver has an entire world inside their body. If the mid-level ranked 6 dragon had self-destructed at its full strength, it would have devastated not only the capital of the Gehenna Empire but also the millions of kilometers surrounding it. To ensure nothing goes wrong when the Light Dragon acts on behalf of the Dragon Islands, claiming that Eldrakkar had killed Baphomet, Azeroth had cut off Baphomet's connection with his soul lamp when he had used his soul slash skill on Eldrakkar and Baphomet before throwing them into the void. Because the connection between the soul lamp and Baphomet was severed by Azeroth, the soul lamp shattered, giving the wrong impression to the vice-commander of the demons that Baphomet was dead. After the energy storm released by the Light Dragon subsided, the people stood in place without saying anything. The once prosperous demon capital was now in ruins, with dead bodies of demons lying everywhere. Most of the buildings in the capital were destroyed, and the ground was stained with blood. The peak rank 5 demon who had talked to the Light Dragon knelt on the ground, looking at the sky with a blank expression. His body was riddled with injuries and blood was flowing out of him without stopping, but he didn't care and just sat there silently. Although he tried his best to stop the energy storm released by the Light Dragon, he was still unable to prevent the destruction of the capital. As the commander of the capital's security, this was a huge blow to him. Suddenly, an aura of a mid-level ranked 6 core evolver once again surrounded the entire capital. The peak rank 5 demon thought the evil Light Dragon had somehow come back to life, so he quickly stood up and was ready to do anything to stop the dragon and prevent further damage to the demon empire. But soon he noticed the aura enveloping the capital was different, and when he looked up, he saw a handsome man with black hair and cold eyes surveying the destruction with an angry expression. Upon seeing the man, the peak rank 5 demon immediately recognized him and a sigh of relief escaped his mouth. The man in the sky was Halphus, the only mid-level ranked 6 demon in the Gehenna Empire. After looking around the destruction for a bit, Halphus glanced at the peak rank 5 demon who was bleeding and said in a cold voice, "Take care of the injured and call for backup from the other cities." After giving the simple order, Halphus didn't wait for the demon's response and disappeared from the sky. The peak rank 5 demon regained some of his spirit due to Halphus' arrival and quickly took action. He contacted the cities close to the demon capital and asked for backup while gathering all the demons who could still work to organize the capital. After giving the order to the peak rank 5 demon, Halphus arrived a few thousand kilometers away from the demon capital. The cold look on his face had disappeared, replaced by a look of worry as he looked at a limbless, charred demon lying in a deep pit. The demon's breathing was very shallow as if he would die at any moment. Seeing Rom's beginner-level ranked 6 demon condition, Halphus knew that without timely treatment, he would certainly die. Halphus and Rom had been friends for hundreds of years, so seeing him on the brink of death, Halphus' eyes flashed with murderous intent and he gritted his teeth. "Dragon Islands," he said while clenching his fist as a look of hatred flashed in his eyes. Although he hadn't arrived at the demon capital in time, he knew what had happened. He had watched everything from the attack of the magic cannon to the self-destruction of the Light Dragon, so he knew the dragon aimed to destroy the capital under Eldrakkar's orders. "I won't let you go," Halphus said and took a deep breath to calm down, knowing it wasn't the time to act rashly. He looked at Rom, who was dying, and took out a high-grade rank 5 healing pill from his storage ring. Seeing the healing pill, Halphus felt a pang of pain deep within his heart, as it was not easy to obtain rank 5 healing pills and he only had 3 of them. "Forget it, I can get more healing pills in the future, but a rank 6 core evolver is more important to the current demon empire," Halphus said and stuffed the pill into Rom's mouth. As the pill entered Rom's mouth, a bright green light covered him and his charred body slowly started to recover. Although his lost limbs were not regenerated, the bleeding stopped, and his weak breathing stabilized. At the same time, his declining aura began to rise, and soon his life was no longer in danger. Once Halphus confirmed that Rom's life was out of danger, his tense face relaxed and he looked back in the direction of the destroyed capital. "Dragon Islands," he muttered once again and a cold light flashed in his eyes. However, he didn't immediately rush to make any decisions because, before deciding anything, he had to confirm Baphomet's situation. "You just have 6 years. After 6 years, the formation will be destroyed, so become strong enough before that." Hearing Azeroth's words, Evan wanted to ask him what he was talking about and how he could take Allura with him, but before he could, a silver light flashed and he disappeared from the tomb. Evan's vision was covered by blinding light, and when he regained his senses, he saw he was drifting through the void space. The remnant power left behind by Azeroth covered his body and he was moving through the void at rapid speed. The token that Ashley had given to the people before entering the tomb was hovering above his head, releasing space fluctuations as if it were a compass guiding his way through the void. Upon seeing the token hovering above his head and the void space around him, he immediately understood that he was expelled from the tomb. But knowing that he was expelled from the tomb didn't make him happy. Instead, his face turned red with anger. That bastard! He gritted his teeth and looked behind to see if he could see the tomb. But upon looking back, all he saw was the black void space. He said he would help me take the halberd of destruction away with me, but he sent me out before I could take it, Evan said in a voice filled with anger, and tried to use the token hovering above his head to see if he could go back to the tomb. Unfortunately, the token didn't respond and continued to guide him through the void space, taking him back to Utopia. Just when Evan was feeling depressed because he wasn't able to bring Alora with him, he suddenly remembered what had happened earlier when he poured his spiritual power into the halberd of destruction. At that time, I felt something break free from the halberd and enter my body. Evan thought to himself and used his spiritual senses to see what had entered his body. Looking at his body using his spiritual senses, Evan didn't find anything. He frowned and tried to scan himself from head to toe, but even then, he wasn't able to find anything. Just when he was wondering if it was just his imagination, something clicked in his mind and he used the Psychic Soul Realm skill. Using the Psychic Soul Realm skill, he entered his soul space, and when he saw his soul space, he was completely stunned. After Azeroth's soul strand disappeared from his soul space, it had become a completely white space. But currently, his soul space was neither black nor white. Now it was golden in color, and the power of destruction was flowing everywhere within it. Evan felt the power of destruction that filled his soul space and noticed it wasn't harming his soul in any way. Instead, this power of destruction was tempering his soul, improving the quality of his spiritual power. In the middle of his soul space, a jet black halberd with a red handle and green outlines was hovering. Evan didn't know why, but compared to the halberd of destruction that he had seen in the tomb, he felt this halberd looked a little different. It was as if this halberd was not real. Even the connection that he felt with the halberd of destruction was weaker compared to before. What's wrong with this halberd? Evan muttered in a low voice and walked towards the jet black weapon that was hovering in the middle of his soul space. After coming in front of the halberd, he lifted his hand and touched its frame. As he touched the frame, the feeling of cold metal transmitted to his brain through his fingertip. It doesn't feel like it is fake, Evan said after touching the halberd and took a deep breath. Alora, he called out in a soft voice, but there was no response. He tried to call out to Alora a few more times, but he did not receive any response from the halberd. Don't tell me he just gave me the halberd but kept Alora inside the tomb. Evan thought with an ugly look on his face, but felt Azeroth shouldn't have done that. Suddenly, he thought about something and used a little bit of the spiritual power he had. Just like how he poured his spiritual power into the halberd when he was in the tomb, Evan once again poured his power into it. The moment he poured his spiritual power into the halberd, his vision changed, and he saw Alora sleeping in a bright golden space with her eyes closed. Around her, a large amount of energy was constantly swirling and seeping inside her. Origin Essence. With just a single look, Evan recognized the energy that was swirling around Alora. This energy gave him the same feeling he experienced when Azeroth extracted the drop of Origin Essence from his body. So she is still absorbing the remaining energy of the Origin Essence, Evan thought inwardly and sighed in relief. After observing her for a few seconds, he noticed that as the Origin Essence entered her body, his connection with her was improving. At this rate, she should be able to wake up in a few hours, Evan said with a thoughtful look on his face. He stared at the halberd of destruction for a few more seconds and finally left his soul space. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that this halberd was slightly different from the one he had seen in the tomb, though he couldn't pinpoint what was different about it. I will know once Alora wakes up, Evan told himself and opened his eyes, only to find himself still drifting in the void. Suddenly, while moving through the void, he noticed some objects floating in the dark space. Seeing something floating in the void, Evan raised an eyebrow and used an ice chain to catch them while moving forward. After catching the objects, Evan looked at them and, upon seeing what they were, his lips arched upwards and he burst into a laughter. After catching the objects, Evan looked at them and burst into laughter. Void Crystal, low level, an extremely rare crystal created from the void energy of the void space. Refining this crystal can increase your understanding of the conceptual energy of void by 1%. Void Crystal, mid-level, an extremely rare crystal created from the void energy and the power of space. Refining this crystal can increase your understanding of the conceptual energy of void and space by 3%. Void crystal, high level, an extremely rare crystal created from the void energy and the power of space. Refining this crystal can increase your understanding of the conceptual energy of void and space by 5%. Upon refining this crystal, there is a slight chance that you will be able to comprehend a skill related to the void element. Evan read the details of the objects he had caught using the ice chain and was surprised that the mid-level and high-level void crystals were quite different from the low-level ones. He had found a low-level void crystal long ago when he first arrived in Utopia and was forced to escape into the void to save himself from Ashley. Honestly, after finding the void crystal, Evan wanted to enter the void space again to search for more void crystals as they were quite useful to him. However, Ashley warned him not to enter the void space recklessly because aside from the void energy storms that randomly swept through the void space, there were also many void beasts that dominated it. Ashley told him that if he encountered a high-level void beast, he wouldn't be able to escape from it as void beasts were far stronger than normal monsters. I was worried about my conceptual energy of void, but with these crystals, I can easily increase it to an appropriate level, Evan said with a sigh as he looked at the 6 low-level, 4 mid-level, and 3 high-level void crystals in his hands. Evan's current understanding of void energy was 26%. He was already a mid-level rank 2 core evolver, and other than increasing the rank of his core to the limit of peak rank 2, the thing that he needed to do to become a rank 3 core evolver was to evolve his zone into an illusionary world. To evolve his zone into an illusionary world, he needed to increase his understanding of his void energy to 75%. Evan was worried that he would reach the peak of rank 2 in just a few months, but it would take him quite some time to increase his understanding of void energy to 75%. But now, with the help of these void crystals, he could increase his understanding of void energy by a huge level without much effort. Now that I remember, after becoming a rank 2 core evolver, I got one more slot in the space of Rune of Evolution to increase the level of items. Evan suddenly remembered something and said with a small smile on his face. After the Fire Domain Stone in the evolution space of the Rune of Evolution evolved into a perfect level Fire Domain Stone, Evan had placed the Scarlet Blood Rose into the evolution space to evolve it further. Evan got the Scarlet Blood Rose in Chap. 789. According to the information he received from the Rune of Evolution after placing the Scarlet Blood Rose into the evolution space, it would take around 6 months for it to evolve to the next stage. After becoming a rank 2 core evolver, he gained another slot to evolve a second item inside the evolution space. But because he didn't have anything good to evolve, Evan decided to use this slot later on, and now that he had void crystals, it was obvious he was thinking about evolving one of them. Without checking the low and mid-level void crystals, Evan directly tried to place one of the high-level void crystals into the evolution space. It will take 5 months and 3 days to evolve the high-level void crystal into perfect level space and void crystal. Do you want to evolve the high-level void crystal? Yes, no. Evan looked at the time needed to evolve the high-level void crystal and pondered for a few seconds. It will still take me a few months to evolve my core to the limit of the peak of rank 2, so it should be fine. He thought inwardly and chose, yes, without hesitation. The moment Evan chose, yes, one of the high-level void crystals in his hands turned into a beam of purple light and entered the Rune of Evolution engraved on his chest. Evan closed his eyes and looked inside the evolution space of the Rune of Evolution, only to see Scarlet Blood Rose and the void crystal hovering there without moving. After taking a look, he put away the rest of the void crystals inside his shadow storage and continued to look around to see if he could find more void crystals before leaving the void space. Unfortunately for him, even after 10 minutes, he did not see any other void crystals. When Evan wasn't able to find any other void crystals, he didn't think too much about it and waited for the token given to him by Ashley to take him back to Utopia. Now that I think about it, when I asked Azeroth what the Origin Universe is, he said it is a place he destroyed with his own hands. In the vision that the Halberd of Destruction showed me, Azeroth nearly destroyed the entire universe to obliterate that purple eye. Are these two things related to each other? Evan suddenly muttered while rubbing his chin. He didn't know why, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt he was right. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, the space token moving along with him released a blinding silver light and Evan disappeared from the void space. Evan closed his eyes because of the blinding silver light, and when he opened them again, he found himself standing in the teleportation building from where he had entered the Tomb of the Ancient. With a flash of silver light, Evan appeared in the teleportation building from where Ashley had sent him to the Tomb of the Ancient. It seems the long-lasting peace of Utopia is about to break. The moment Evan appeared in the building, he heard Sylvan's serious voice and raised an eyebrow. At the same time, he felt many eyes fixed on him as if everyone was waiting for him. Evan looked beside him and saw a large holographic screen hovering in midair, showing a desolate place in ruins. Blood and dead bodies of demons were piled up everywhere, and some high-level demons were trying to calm down the scared crowd. What's going on? Evan narrowed his eyes when he saw the destructive scene on the screen, and for some reason, he felt as if his soul was jumping around in joy like a naughty child who just did something incredible. Weird, he frowned slightly while feeling a sense of accomplishment upon seeing the ruined city on the screen, but he couldn't understand why he felt this way. Just as Evan was deep in thought, someone appeared in front of him and asked in a desperate voice, "Evan, do you know where Carla is? She hasn't returned yet." Hearing Cedar's question, Evan froze and didn't know how to answer. Jack, Orpal, and Kiera, the other 3 dryads who had entered the tomb with him, also approached and looked at him with anxious eyes. They had all been friends with Carla since childhood, so just like Cedar, they were also worried about her. Seeing their anxious eyes, Evan opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He wanted to tell them she was dead but didn't know how to deliver the news. When Cedar and the others saw Evan's hesitant expression, their bodies trembled. Although he hadn't said anything, just from his expression, they could tell that something bad must have happened. "All right, calm down a little." Seeing Evan's expression, Sylvan, who had lived for thousands of years, understood that something serious must have happened, so he stepped forward and tried to calm Cedar and the others. Although his heart also felt heavy after realizing that something had happened to Carla, he couldn't let his emotions take control. Hearing Sylvan, Cedar and the others backed away a little from Evan, but they still looked at him with anxious eyes, waiting for his answer. Once Cedar and the others backed away, Evan sighed inwardly and took a deep breath. He looked at Cedar and the others and finally spoke in a low voice. "Carla is no longer with us." Although Evan spoke in a low voice, everyone present in the building was a high-level core evolver, so all of them clearly heard his words. How could it be? Cedar and the other 3 dryads who had entered the tomb with him were stunned after hearing him. Even though they had already suspected something had happened to Carla based on Evan's expressions, they still couldn't believe she was dead. You're joking with us, right?" Cedar forced a smile and asked in a trembling voice. He wanted Evan to say he was just messing with them, but seeing Evan lower his head with a sigh, tears started to flow from his eyes. Sylvan also closed his eyes and sighed heavily. Although he had expected something might happen to the dryads who entered the tomb, as it was a very dangerous place not only because of the monsters but also because of the other people, it was still hard for him to accept the death of one of the children whom he treated like a granddaughter. He looked at Cedar, Jack, Kiera, and Orpal, who had tears in their eyes, and for the first time, doubted whether it had been the right decision to send them into the tomb. "You know, if you want them to grow up, you can't keep them here all the time," Alaric, who had been standing to the side, walked up to Sylvan and said while patting his shoulder. The closed world of the dryads was a place where other than dryads, no one lived. It was impossible for people like Cedar and others to grow up in such a place after a certain period of time. Not only to hone their combat abilities but also to help them grow mentally, it was necessary for them to go out into the world. The dream of the dryads was to go back to Utopia and live there without fear of other races who were after them. If people like Cedar and the others, who were the future leaders of their race, didn't even have knowledge about the outside world, how could they achieve their dream of going back to Utopia? Hearing Alaric's words, Sylvan took a deep breath and nodded. He knew Alaric was right. After all, if it wasn't for his knowledge about Utopia and the many connections he had made when the dryads were still living in Utopia, it would have been impossible for him to save the small numbers of dryads who were currently living in the closed world. Although the current situation of the dryads was better than before, Sylvan knew that the dryads were too dependent on him. If by any chance something happened to him, he was sure that the dryads would fall into a very bad state. To avoid this kind of situation, it was necessary to let Cedar and other future leaders of the dryads leave the closed world and gain a better understanding of the outside world. "I know it's necessary, but still," Sylvan thought inwardly and clenched his fist, feeling powerless because he couldn't do anything even if he wanted to. Just when everyone was feeling heavy, a calm voice that stunned everyone rang out in the teleportation building. "Why are you all acting as if we can't do anything? Since she is dead, we just need to revive her, right? Why are you all acting as if we can't do anything? Since she is dead, we just need to revive her, right?" Sylvan, Alaric, Cedar, and the others were stunned when they heard this and quickly looked in the direction of the voice. Evan on the other hand, frowned because the voice sounded very familiar. Just like Sylvan and the others, he looked in the direction of the voice and when he saw who had spoken, his eyes widened in shock. Anastasia. It wasn't difficult for him to recognize the long black-haired woman as he had seen her many times in his memories. In most of the memories he unlocked, besides his shadow undeads, she was the only one who was with him. Seeing her, Evan felt his mind buzzing and many scenes flashed before his eyes, sending his emotions into complete turmoil. At the same time, a notification he had seen in his memory long ago flashed before his eyes. Chap. 563. The effect of the title The Cursed One is being nullified by the title, The Progenitor of Shadow Dragons. This notification again, Evan looked at the notification that flashed in front of him and he had many questions in his mind. But he knew it wasn't the time to ask those questions. Even though he wanted to know how Anastasia had appeared here or what the relationship between these two titles was, he restrained himself and tried to appear calm. Anastasia noticed the shocked expression that Evan showed upon seeing her, and her lips arched upwards a little. It seems the soul seals he shattered already unlocked some of his memories about me. Anastasia smiled inwardly and sighed in relief, as she was afraid that Evan wouldn't even recognize her. But after seeing his shocked look, she was at least certain that he had some memories related to her. She calmly walked towards him and asked in a playful voice, "Why are you so shocked? Aren't you happy that mommy is here to see you?" Evan was taken aback when he heard Anastasia's words and felt a chill run down his spine. He also finally remembered how he introduced himself as the son of Shadow Monarch when he first met Sylvan. "Fouquet, I completely forgot about the messed up identity that I created after coming to Utopia." Evan cursed himself and glanced at Sylvan from the corner of his eyes, only to see him looking at him with eyes full of resentment. Seeing the way Sylvan was looking at him, Evan couldn't help but take a step back. Why is this old man looking at me like I dumped him for another woman? Evan thought and felt Sylvan's mental condition was not right. Sylvan didn't care about Evan's odd reaction and continued to stare at him the same way. He wanted to shout that because of his fake identity, he nearly got spanked by Anastasia. If not for his precious granddaughter Ashley, who saved his A*S in time, he wouldn't have been able to show his face in public. Anastasia ignored Sylvan's behavior and stopped just a meter away from Evan. Evan looked at Anastasia, who was now just a meter away from him and gulped. "Damn, I shouldn't have turned her into my mother at that time," he shouted inwardly and tried to remain calm. Though, from the nervous look in his eyes, it was clear that he was afraid Anastasia would beat him up. When Anastasia saw the nervous look in Evan's eyes, she chuckled and touched his face. "Welcome back, Master. I have been waiting for you for a long time." Although Evan was not good at perceiving other people's emotions because of the kind of lonely life he had lived till now, hearing Anastasia's voice, he could feel care and longing in her tone. Knowing she wasn't going to beat him up, he sighed in relief and was about to say something when someone else spoke up. "Can you tell us more about what you said earlier?" Cedar, who was standing at the side, spoke in a nervous voice. He was waiting for Anastasia to explain what she meant by reviving Carla, but looking at the scene in front of him, he felt if he didn't speak, these people would forget about the main issue. At the same time, while speaking, Cedar looked at Sylvan with disdainful eyes. As the elder, he should be the one to ask Anastasia about this matter, but he was just standing like a fool, looking at Evan as if he was dumped by him. Anastasia pulled her hand back from Evan's face and turned her head towards Cedar, who was looking at her nervously, hoping she was not lying about the revival. "It's not difficult," Anastasia spoke in a calm voice. "Master can revive her using his shadow energy." "Master, shadow energy," Cedar repeated in a confused voice, not understanding what Anastasia was talking about. "Don't call me master, you woman," Evan really wanted to shout when he heard Anastasia, but he decided to ignore it for the time being and said in a low voice. "I am not on that level, yet. Forget about reviving someone, I can't even use the life energy that is mixed inside my shadow energy." Actually, after seeing Azeroth revive the light dragon, Evan had already thought about doing the same thing with Carla. However, since his current level was not enough to bring her back to life, he hadn't mentioned it to Sylvan and the others. Moreover, he knew the dragon was not permanently revived, so he wasn't sure if he would be able to permanently revive Carla in the future. If he promised to revive Carla but failed, he would be giving them false hope, so he didn't speak anything about it earlier. "You can't revive her for now, but it doesn't mean you won't be able to in the future," Anastasia said while shaking her head when she heard Evan. Cedar, Jack, and the others were confused when they heard Evan and Anastasia's conversation. However, Sylvan and Alaric, especially the fox who knew about Evan's real identity, immediately understood what Anastasia was talking about. To think he can revive a dead person. Alaric thought inwardly and shook his head. He looked at Sylvan, who had a thoughtful look on his face, and sent him a sound transmission. Hearing Alaric's message, Sylvan nodded and stepped forward. He looked at Cedar and the other 3 dryads who had just come out of the tomb and said in a serious voice, "You guys go back and rest for now. As for Carla's matter, we will talk about it later." "Grandpa, but, Cedar." Sylvan didn't give Cedar a chance to speak and looked at him sternly. Seeing Sylvan's stern look, Cedar closed his mouth and sighed. "Don't worry, I will explain everything to you tomorrow." Seeing Cedar's dejected look, Evan said to him. Hearing Evan, Cedar's expression visibly brightened, and he left along with Jack and the others. Once Cedar and the others left, Sylvan looked at Evan and said with a sneer on his old face, "You should also go back. I think you need to take care of some family matters." Evan's mouth couldn't help but twitch at Sylvan's sarcastic remark, and he wondered why this guy was pissed off. Although he wanted to know what happened, he didn't dwell too much on it and left the building as well. Anastasia followed behind Evan, and soon both of them disappeared. Evan left the teleportation building along with Anastasia and flew towards his house. Although there were many things he was curious about, such as the ruined place he saw on the holographic screen or why Sylvan said the peace in Utopia wouldn't last long, he decided to put all of that at the back of his mind for now. It wasn't that these things weren't important for him, but in his mind, they weren't as crucial as talking with Anastasia. He had seen her in his memories many times, so he felt he might be able to get some good information from her. Besides, from the way Anastasia had been looking at him in the teleportation building, he could tell she also wanted to talk to him. While flying towards his house, neither of them said anything. As he was flying, Evan suddenly thought about Biscuit and a frown appeared on his face. Before the tomb collapsed, Azeroth had sent out all the people who entered the tomb and the monsters in it to Utopia. This meant Biscuit was also somewhere in Utopia. He still had Biscuit's soul essence, so he could sense its general location, but to do so, he would have to leave the closed world of the Dryads since this world was in another dimension. Well, that dumb bird was very close to becoming a mid-level rank 3 monster, so as long as it doesn't do anything stupid, it should be able to survive until I find it. Evan thought inwardly and stopped worrying about it. Around 10 minutes later, Evan and Anastasia landed in front of his house. Looking at the familiar house, mountain, and the flowing river from the top of the mountain, Evan took a deep breath and felt relaxed. Maybe, this house is really turning into my home, Evan thought with a slight smile as he looked around at the familiar scenery. Anastasia also looked around with interest and asked in a curious voice, "Master, have you been living here since you arrived in Utopia?" Evan was about to walk into the house but stopped when he heard Anastasia and turned around to look at her. "First of all, stop calling me master. And as for your question, yes, I have spent most of my time here since I came to Utopia." Anastasia was stunned when she heard Evan, but she quickly returned to normal and asked in a calm voice, "If not, master, then what should I call you? Don't you know my name?" Evan looked at the black-haired woman weirdly and said in a plain voice, "Just call me by my name. It is already a hassle that my shadow undeads call me master. I asked them to stop calling me that, but they just changed it into more outrageous ones like King, Emperor, Great One, and many more. In the end, I just stopped caring about them, but it still feels weird when someone other than my shadow undeads calls me master." Anastasia couldn't help but laugh when she heard Evan. "So the new ones are also similar to the old ones in this regard," she muttered and shook her head. "Old ones?" Evan raised an eyebrow at Anastasia and looked at her in confusion. Anastasia didn't answer Evan's question. Instead, she asked him, "So what should I call you, Evan or Azro?" "Is that even a question?" Evan interrupted Anastasia midway and said in a plain voice, "I am Evan, and before we talk about anything else, I want to tell you that I am very different from the person you call Azeroth." Evan said those words deliberately because although he was more or less certain that he was Azeroth in his past life, he still wanted to see Anastasia's reaction upon hearing he was different from Azeroth. But unfortunately for him, upon hearing his words, Anastasia didn't show any strange reaction and just smiled a little. "So Evan it is," she said with a smile on her face. And added after a moment, "Actually, it does not matter to me if your personality is not similar to before, and if I speak the truth, I am actually happy about this change. After all, this change is already a big step towards your goal," she added inwardly but didn't say out loud. Evan looked at Anastasia, who was smiling happily for some reason and shook his head. He turned around and walked inside the house. "Let's go in, I am sure we have a lot to talk about." Anastasia looked at Evan, who was walking ahead, and after a moment, followed him inside. "Sit wherever you want," Evan said to Anastasia after entering the house and moved towards the bathroom. "Just give me a few minutes, I need to clean myself." Before coming out of the tomb, Evan had just fought against Baphomet, Eldrakar, and Eldritch goblins, so he was in a complete mess. His clothes were stained with blood and dirt, and he was looking like a run-down beggar. When Anastasia heard Evan was going to take a bath, her eyes lit up and she asked in a playful voice, "Want me to help you?" Evan did not stop when he heard Anastasia and replied in a flat voice, "No thanks." He entered the bathroom and closed the door behind him. After entering the bathroom, he took a deep breath and looked at the soul seals that were placed on his soul. He took off his blood-stained clothes and walked towards the shower. As he turned on the shower and warm water poured down on his body, his tensed muscles relaxed. "Azeroth told me to start breaking the seals from above," Evan said inwardly, and with a thought, his spiritual power moved towards the uppermost seal placed on his soul. His current spiritual power was already higher than a normal mid-level rank 3 core evolver, so it wasn't difficult for him to break the seal. The moment his spiritual power touched the seal, it shattered like fragile glass and a surge of memories flooded Evan's head. The moment Evan shattered one of the soul seals, a flood of memories rushed into his mind. Because of the sudden surge of memories, he felt a mild headache and a deep frown appeared on his face. At the same time, his vision shifted and he found himself standing in a dark space. Slowly, light began to appear around him, and the environment turned ocean blue in color. Evan looked around and saw a fish swimming nearby. Seeing the fish, he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow because he immediately realized he was underwater. As he looked around, Evan saw many sea monsters ranging from the weakest F rank to rank 2. Other than these monsters, he occasionally noticed some very high-level ones. He was especially shocked when he saw a giant white-colored whale because the aura he felt from it was comparable to Ashley's, indicating it was a rank 5 monster. "Why am I here?" After seeing different kinds of sea monsters for a moment, Evan got bored and couldn't help but think. Just when he was wondering why the memory he unblocked was showing him sea monsters, he felt a sudden pull. He looked in the direction of the pull and noticed it was coming from the bottom of the sea. Although he could resist the pulling force, Evan didn't do so and his illusionary body was pulled towards the bottom of the sea. As his body drifted towards the bottom, he came across many monsters, but since it was just a memory, these monsters didn't seem to notice Evan, who was moving towards the bottom. About a minute later, he reached the bottom of the sea and was shocked because, at the bottom, he saw a giant monster sleeping. This monster, it doesn't look like a sea monster, Evan thought with narrowed eyes and moved sideways to take a proper look at the monster. As Evan moved sideways, he was finally able to get a proper look at the monster and was taken aback when he saw what kind of creature it was. The creature had a long body similar to a snake, covered in deep blue scales, cold dark golden eyes and a powerful aura. A dragon, Evan thought with a surprised look on his face because he did not expect to see a dragon at the bottom of the sea. More importantly, the aura around the dragon was even stronger than Sylvan's, which means it was a rank 6 dragon. Azeroth told me to break the soul seal starting from the top. Is he telling me about the location of a potential monster that I can turn into shadow undead in the future? Evan thought while rubbing his chin but felt it was unlikely that Azeroth wanted to tell him about a monster that he could turn into a shadow undead in the near future. Just when Evan was thinking about what this memory was about, he suddenly noticed there was something at the bottom of the sea, right beside the dragon. He moved towards the bottom to take a closer look at the thing, and as he moved closer, he noticed the pulling force he felt earlier actually came from the thing that was beside the dragon. Soon, Evan was just 4 meters above the sea bottom and he noticed the thing beside the dragon was actually a giant formation or something that looked like a magic circle. As he looked at the magic circle, the information about its location started to appear in his mind. At the same time, other information that was completely unrelated to the magic circle also appeared in his mind. The warm water from the shower continued to pour down on Evan as he kept his eyes closed, trying to digest all the memories. Around 15 minutes later, he sorted out most of the memories and opened his eyes. He tried to see if he could break another seal but felt some resistance. Although he could break the seal if he pushed his spiritual power to its limit, he decided against it to avoid damaging his soul by forcefully breaking the seal. The war between the primordials, Evan muttered in a low voice as he sorted out one of the memories he had just received after breaking the seal. Most of the memories he unlocked were irrelevant, but two things caught his attention. First was the information about a war that happened long ago between the primordials. This information appeared at the very end, so other than knowing that the war was brutal and destroyed countless worlds, there was no other detail about it. Although there wasn't much information, Evan had a feeling he would receive more details about it when he broke another seal. The second thing that caught his attention was related to the Dragon Islands, or more specifically, the area of the boundless ocean just below the Dragon Islands. The Dragon Islands is a group of hundreds of different islands floating in the middle of the boundless ocean. According to the information he received, there is something at the bottom of the sea, just below the central island of the Dragon Islands. Although Evan didn't receive clear information about what lies at the bottom of the boundless ocean, he had a feeling that whatever it was, it would be quite useful to him. I don't think after what happened in the tomb, I would be able to go to the Dragon Islands easily, Evan muttered with a frown on his face. At the same time, he couldn't help but sigh because he knew at this point, most of the factions of Utopia must already know about him. Although they know about me, I don't think they would think I am Azeroth. At best, they would just think I have some kind of relationship with him. Evan said in a low voice, but then he thought about Baphomet and Eldrakkar and shook his head. Maybe other people would think I just have some kind of relationship with the Shadow Monarch, but these two. After what happened in the tomb, they must be aware that this matter is not as simple as it seems. Even though Evan knew Baphomet and Eldrakkar would suspect there was something wrong with him, especially after getting their A*s kicked by Azeroth in the tomb, he wasn't worried about them because he was certain they wouldn't tell anyone about this matter. The reason? It was very simple. From what he knew or heard about Eldrakkar and Baphomet, both of them were quite prideful people, so it was simply impossible for them to tell others that they got their A*s kicked by someone who wasn't even a rank 3 core evolver. Though, I am still curious why Azeroth said Baphomet and Eldrakkar would regret entering the void space. Because Sylvan and others did not tell Evan about what happened in the Gehenna Empire and how the light dragon that Azeroth revived raised the capital, he had no idea about the chaos that was going on in Utopia due to the disappearance of Baphomet and Eldrakkar or about the fact that many people already assumed Baphomet was killed by Eldrakkar. Other than these two pieces of information, the rest of the memories he received were just random everyday things, going around Utopia with his shadow undeads and Anastasia, killing monsters, and other normal activities. Evan sorted through all the memories and found a common thing in all of them. In all of these memories, Anastasia was always with me, he muttered with a weird look on his face and wondered if it was a coincidence. Although she was always with me, I just used her as my chef. He thought while rubbing his forehead. With his current personality, he couldn't believe he had used a rank 6 progenitor dragon as a mere chef. She is the progenitor of shadow dragons, and her stealth can be said to be the best in Utopia. Instead of using her as a chef, wouldn't it be better to ask her to steal all the precious things from the rich people? Evan thought while considering Anastasia's godly stealth ability. She can rob all the factions without alerting anyone. Honestly, he wanted to go out and ask Anastasia to go on a robbing spree. Who knows, in one of the treasuries of the factions, she might find a high-level treasure that can help him become a rank 3 or rank 4 core evolver directly. Although Evan wanted to ask Anastasia to steal things for him, he felt his skin wasn't thick enough to ask such a thing. Well, whatever, I will think about these things after clearing some of my doubts with her, Evan said to himself and turned off the shower. The best thing about the memories released by the soul seals is that they don't affect his current personality. Although in the memories he spent a long time with Anastasia, these memories didn't affect his judgment towards her. At best, these memories just gave him a favorable impression of her. I was afraid that breaking the soul seals would eventually affect my personality, but it seems I was worried for nothing, Evan said as he took out a new set of comfortable clothes from his shadow storage. For a second, prismatic fire flashed around him and the water covering his body instantly disappeared. After drying off, he put on the set of clothes he had taken out earlier and tied his shoulder-length black hair into a ponytail before walking closer to the door and leaving the bathroom. Coming out of the bathroom, Evan went to the living room to talk with Anastasia, but when he reached there, he found the shadow dragon was not there. He frowned when he didn't see her in the living room and used his spiritual senses to scan his house. Using his spiritual senses, he found her rather quickly, but when he saw what she was doing, a weird look appeared on his face. Is this what people mean by if you do an activity every day, it will eventually turn into a habit? Evan thought inwardly as he watched Anastasia cooking in the kitchen. Anastasia felt Evan's spiritual senses, but she just smiled and didn't say anything. Evan did not know what she was cooking, nor did he care because he was too tired to think about these things for now. He stopped using his spiritual senses and sat down on the sofa. As he sat down and leaned back on the sofa comfortably, his body screamed in satisfaction because it was after a very long time that he felt relaxed. In the tomb, after entering the first layer, he was never able to relax properly because the first layer was quite dangerous. Moreover, just before coming out of the tomb, he went through a ride of a heavenly roller coaster. From meeting Eldracar in Baphomet to fighting against eldritch goblins and then receiving the information that Allura was a weapon spirit, too many things happened in a short period of time and his mind was completely exhausted from all of these things. But to think my daughter used to be a big bully who terrorized the entire universe, huh? Evan remembered the things Azeroth spoke of and, for some reason, his lips arched upwards. If she was still as strong as before, I could have walked around Utopia like an arrogant young master, beating people here and there for no reason. Although Evan didn't like acting like a young master, for some reason, thinking about the scene where Baphomet was kneeling in front of him and he was saying in an arrogant voice, "If you want to live then abolish your core and cut off your third leg," made him nod in satisfaction. After deciding he would torture the demon bastard in the future for nearly killing him, he closed his eyes and looked at his soul space using the Psychic Soul Realm skill to check Allura's condition. She is still absorbing the remaining power of Origin Essence. Evan looked at the jet black halberd that was hovering in his soul space before he stopped using the Psychic Soul Realm skill. After taking a look at Allura, he looked towards the kitchen and closed his eyes to rest until Anastasia came back. As he closed his eyes, without realizing it, the mental fatigue accumulated because of the recent events hit him and he fell asleep. After a long time, Evan slowly opened his eyes and the ceiling of his living room greeted his eyes. Evan frowned when he saw the ceiling of his living room and a momentary look of confusion flashed inside his eyes. But the look of confusion didn't last long because he soon remembered what he was doing before he fell asleep. "So, how was your sleep?" He suddenly heard a soft voice and raised his head a little while still lying down, only to see Anastasia's smiling face. Evan blinked a few times and finally realized his head was resting on something soft, and that thing was a thigh. He took a deep breath and calmly sat up before answering her question. "My sleep was pretty good, thanks for asking. I am glad to hear that." Although Evan appeared calm on the outside, he was actually quite shocked inside. And just to be clear, he wasn't shocked because he felt her thigh was quite soft. Believe him, he was shocked because he didn't realize when Anastasia got near him and put his head on her thigh. Although he didn't want to brag, he knew his instincts were quite sharp. Especially after spending most of his time in the wilderness since he was transmigrated to Aurora World. In the Aurora World, he spent most of his time in the wilderness instead of a city, so his instincts became quite sharp as even though his shadow undeads kept watch while he slept at night, he still had to be on alert all the time in case of any danger, but even then he did not realize when Anastasia got close to him. But it didn't take him long to remember that Anastasia was not an ordinary person. She was a shadow dragon and not just any shadow dragon but the progenitor of them. So it was literally impossible for him to sense her if she didn't want to be sensed. "How long was I sleeping?" he asked after a moment. "It's already past midnight, so it should be around 15 hours, Anastasia said after thinking for a while, as she had found him asleep when she was done with cooking. 15 hours, huh? Evan wasn't surprised when he heard he had slept for nearly 15 hours because he knew he was mentally exhausted. He sighed and looked at Anastasia before saying in an apologetic voice, "I'm sorry. I know you were cooking for me, but I fell asleep without eating it." After seeing the recent memories that he had just unlocked after shattering the soul seal, it wasn't difficult for him to guess that she was cooking for him, but since he fell asleep without eating, he thought he should at least apologize. "Don't worry about it," Anastasia shook her head, hearing Evan and asked in a slightly expectant voice, "Since you're awake, do you want to have dinner now?" Evan was slightly taken aback when he saw Anastasia's enthusiastic expression, but he still nodded his head as he was really hungry. Seeing Evan nodding his head, Anastasia placed her hand on his shoulder and said to him, "Since the food was cooked hours ago, I placed it inside my core world and stopped its time so that it would stay fresh. Don't resist, I will bring you inside my core world." Core world? Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard Anastasia and looked at her in confusion. "You know that in order to become a ranked 6 core evolver, you have to create your own world, right?" A look of realization flashed on Evan's face when he heard Anastasia, and he nodded his head. So you want to bring me to the world that you created when you became rank 6? Yes, Anastasia nodded her head. Well, sure, Evan had no problem with that because, first of all, he knew Anastasia wouldn't hurt him. If she wanted to, she wouldn't need to take him inside her core world, as she could kill him without much trouble. After all, she was a rank 6 core evolver while he was just a mid-level rank 2 noob. On the other hand, he also wanted to see what the core world of a rank 6 core evolver looked like, so he agreed without hesitation. Seeing Evan agree, Anastasia smiled and a silver light flashed around both of them. The next second, when the silver light receded, both of them disappeared from the living room. Sliver of light flashed, and along with Anastasia, Evan disappeared from the living room. When he regained his senses the next second, he found himself floating high in the sky. He looked down and saw a beautiful mountain range, with a clear blue flowing river and some animals walking around it. The sky was completely black, adorned with shining stars and a half-moon hanging between them. Evan was completely stunned when he saw the scene around him and felt the atmosphere because it was just like the outside world. Even the world essence that filled the environment was identical and he could easily absorb it. It doesn't look any different from the outside world, he said after a long silence because he had expected this world to be a lot different from the outside world. Anastasia shook her head when she heard Evan and said after teleporting them to the top of a mountain. From a general point of view, it might look like this world is not different from Utopia, but there are actually a lot of differences between the two. As Anastasia spoke, she pointed towards the sky and the stars shining up there became a lot brighter, illuminating the mountaintop they were standing on with silver moonlight. Evan was slightly taken aback when he saw this, but he didn't speak and continued to listen to Anastasia. One of the most notable differences is that there is no day-night cycle here. It remains dark here 24/7. Evan looked at the shining stars in the sky and asked after a moment, is there a special reason there is no daylight here? Anastasia shook her head and said in a calm voice, there is no particular reason, I just prefer nighttime instead of a shining globe of fire hanging above my head all the time. Evan looked at the shadow dragon beside him with a thoughtful look and after a while, he spoke in a plain voice. I heard most dragons are lazy, so don't tell me this world is dark 24/7 so that you can sleep whenever you want. I mean, no one wants to sleep under a bright sky, right? Anastasia looked away when she heard Evan and started to wave her hand, adjusting the light coming from the stars, completely treating them like a light bulb. When Evan saw Anastasia looking away, he nodded his head and felt the books he read when he was on Earth didn't lie to him. Dragons really are lazy creatures. Cough. Anastasia coughed after adjusting the starlight that was coming from the top of the mountain they were standing on and changed the subject. Another thing different about this world is that, unlike the outside world, this world is completely under my control. As she spoke, the mountain they were standing on changed at a rapid speed. The flat rocky ground they were standing on was covered in green grass in an instant, and a table made of fine wood and 2 chairs rose from the ground. Evan just nodded his head when he saw this because after seeing Anastasia treat the stars as light bulbs, he had already guessed that this world was completely under her control. How big is this world? He asked in a curious voice because even though he could easily see a few thousand kilometers away using his skills, he couldn't see the end of the world. The size of this world is slightly less than Utopia, Anastasia answered truthfully. Slightly less than Utopia, huh? Evan said inwardly and looked around once again. As he was looking around the mountain range, he suddenly noticed a mountain covered in snow a few hundred kilometers away from their current location. Among all the mountains that he could see, this was the only one covered in snow and looked different from the others. Evan didn't know why, but he felt that mountain looked very familiar. It was as if that place was very important to him. When Anastasia saw Evan wasn't speaking, she looked at him and, when she noticed where he was looking, her expression changed slightly before the snowy mountain completely disappeared. Evan was taken aback when the snowy mountain suddenly disappeared, but before he could ask anything, Anastasia clapped her hands and a pot filled with stew appeared on the table she had created earlier. Evan looked at the pot and saw it was covered in a hazy white light. That's time element, Evan said with a surprised look on his face because although the time energy released by the hazy white light was a little weaker than the time liquid he had collected in the tomb, he could feel it. Can you control all kinds of elements while inside this world? Evan asked in a curious voice. Well, not elements, to be precise, I can control the laws of this world, Anastasia said and motioned for Evan to take a seat. Evan nodded with a thoughtful look on his face and sat down on one of the chairs. Anastasia pulled her chair right beside him, and 2 plates and spoons appeared on the table out of nowhere. Evan didn't care where the plates came from, as his eyes were focused on the stew pot. Anastasia snapped her fingers, and the hazy white light that covered the pot disappeared. The moment the hazy white light disappeared, a rich and intoxicating scent filled the air. The aroma was a symphony of savory meat, fresh herbs, and a hint of sweet vegetables, weaving its way through the mountaintop and assaulting Evan's nostrils. Evan was stunned when he smelled the stew, and his stomach growled a bit as he hadn't eaten anything for more than a day. Anastasia smiled when she saw Evan's surprised look and served the stew onto his plate. I used the meat of a beginner-level rank 4 Earth Titan boar to make this stew. Not only is it tasty, but it can also help you increase the rank of your core slightly. Rank 4. Evan was stunned when he heard the rank of the monster she mentioned and wondered if he would explode after eating it. I should be fine. After all, my body did become quite strong after I absorbed the energy Azeroth left behind, he thought, and finally ate the stew using the spoon. As the first bite touched his tongue, Evan was completely stunned. The flavors exploded in his mouth, an intricate dance of warmth, spice, and umami that left him momentarily speechless. He wasn't a culinary expert, so he didn't know much about food, but after tasting the stew, he was sure it was one of the best stews he had ever had. How is it? Anastasia asked in a slightly nervous voice. It's delicious. I think one of the best stews I've ever had, Evan said truthfully and took another bite. Hearing Evan, Anastasia sighed in relief and also took a bite. Seeing Anastasia sighing in relief, Evan smiled and said in a joking voice as he remembered one of the things he saw a long time ago in his memory. You learned cooking for 500 years, so it's not surprising that you can cook so well. Anastasia, who had just taken a bite of the stew, nearly choked on it and looked at Evan with a slightly twitching mouth. You already unlocked that memory. Evan just shrugged when he heard Anastasia and continued to eat. Anastasia shook her head when Evan didn't speak anymore and she also focused on her food. Although she didn't say anything, she was actually happy that he at least had some of the memories about her. The stew was made from a rank 4 monster, so it didn't take long for Evan to reach his limit after eating the second serving. Anastasia also stopped eating once Evan did, and with a snap of her fingers, the stew pot and cutlery disappeared. Thanks for the food, it was really delicious, Evan said after dinner, feeling he needed to refine a lot of world essence that he had just absorbed after eating the stew. Anastasia nodded with a smile on her face, hearing Evan, and stood up from her chair. I know you must have a lot of questions, she said after standing up. You can ask whatever you want and I will try to answer them to the best of my abilities. Shadow Realm, which reduced the effect of his curse by 50%, and how the effect of the curse was further reduced by 10% in the Tomb of the Ancient. I still don't know why the effect of the Cursed One title was reduced by 10% when I was in the tomb. He thought but soon stopped pondering it as he knew he wasn't going to get answers to these questions for now. After stopping thinking about the Cursed One title, he looked back at Anastasia, who was standing in front of him, and asked about another thing he was curious about. Can you tell me more about the Shadow Realm? Can you tell me more about the Shadow Realm? Evan asked. Since the moment he reached C rank and awakened his class, he was aware of the Shadow Realm. But other than the fact that it was somehow connected with his core, he didn't know anything about it. Now that he had a chance, he wanted to know more about it and, if possible, even wanted to go there. Shadow Realm. Anastasia didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she thought for a moment about how to explain everything to him. After thinking for almost a full minute, she finally spoke. You know about the monarch physiques, right? Evan was confused as to why she was asking this question and how it was related to the Shadow Realm, but he still nodded his head. The monarch physique gives its wielder many advantages over other people, like a high amount of mana, abnormal physical and mental strength. They can advance to ranks quickly without worrying about the instability of their core and many other benefits. But the biggest advantage that the wielder of a monarch physique receives is when their core reaches C rank, Anastasia said and continued. Upon reaching C rank, the monarch core creates a realm of its own and starts to produce conceptual energy that the wielder can use freely. This gives monarch physique holders a very big advantage because other people can't use conceptual energy before reaching rank 1, but because of this physique, they can use it just after reaching C rank. Anastasia paused after saying this to let Evan understand these things before she spoke again. Because their monarch core creates a realm of its own that can produce conceptual energy, monarch physique holders don't even need to absorb the cores of monsters after reaching C rank. Their rank will continue to increase on its own. Of course, they can increase the speed of their advancement by absorbing cores, but even if they don't, it would only take them less than a year to become a rank 1 core evolver from C rank because of the conceptual energy produced by the realm created by their core. Wait a second, Evan suddenly stopped Anastasia because he felt he was scammed. You said the rank of people with monarch physique will continue to increase after reaching C rank even if they don't absorb cores, but I never felt something like this. Even after reaching C rank, I had to absorb cores to increase my rank. Anastasia wanted to laugh when she saw Evan's face, which was literally screaming that he felt scammed, but she held back and said while shaking her head. Your case is different from other monarchs. The monarch core creates a realm of its own inside it, but your core did not create its own realm. Instead, it established a connection with the previous shadow realm that you left behind. Because you just have a connection with the shadow realm, unlike other monarch cores that have a whole realm, you had to absorb cores to increase your rank. A look of understanding flashed on Evan's face when he heard Anastasia, and he motioned for her to continue what she was saying earlier. As I was saying, the biggest advantage for monarch physique holders is the realm that their core creates. Once these individuals become rank 1 core evolvers, they just need to increase the rank of their core to advance further. Unlike others who need to create their domain, monarch physique holders don't need to do that, as the realm their core created acts as their domain and will evolve into a zone when they break through to the next rank. Anastasia paused and added after a moment. Monarch physique holders don't need to do anything other than increase the rank of their core. As they do so, the realm that their core created will continue to evolve on its own, from domain to zone, from zone to illusionary world, and so on. Honestly, it's like a cheat that makes you one of the strongest in the shortest amount of time, Anastasia said with a sigh. Even she felt the monarch physique was ridiculous. Evan on the other hand, was staring at her blankly, not knowing what to say. Don't need to create their domain. The domain will evolve into a zone, and the zone will evolve into an illusionary world on its own. Are you kidding me? He finally spoke, his eyes wide open. That's complete bullshit. What about me? I also have a monarch physique, so why do I need to burn my brain to create my domain and do other things? I want VIP treatment too. Well, Anastasia was speechless when she heard Evan because it was the first time she had seen him act like this. Oh, I forgot he is different from before. She suddenly remembered and shook her head with a smile on her face. You would have also received this VIP treatment if your core had created its own realm, but it established a connection with the previous shadow realm. So you can only receive general treatment. Evan's mouth twitched when he heard Anastasia speaking. He could only receive general treatment, and he fell silent. After a while, he asked with a serious look on his face, since my core doesn't have this so-called realm, will it affect me somehow in the future? Don't worry. It won't affect you in any manner, Anastasia said while shaking her head. Since your core has already established a connection with the shadow realm, you can integrate it into your core without any problem. She paused and added after a moment, but to integrate the shadow realm into your core, you will have to increase the rank of your core because the current shadow realm is like a whole world in itself that is even better than Utopia. So it is impossible for you to integrate it with your current core. A world in itself that is even better than Utopia. Evan was stunned when he heard Anastasia. What rank do I need to reach to integrate it with my core? Honestly, I am not sure, Anastasia said with a wary smile on her face. If it was before, then you could have integrated it with your core after becoming a rank 3 core evolver, but a few months ago, the shadow realm evolved, so I am not sure what rank you need to reach to integrate it with your core. Evan was slightly disappointed when he heard Anastasia didn't know what rank he needed to reach, but his disappointment disappeared when he heard her next words. Although I don't know what rank you need to reach, you will be able to feel it on your own the moment you reach that level. The connection that you have with the shadow realm will immediately tell you about it the moment you are ready for it. I will look into it when I go to Eldoria City in the future. He thought, and his face turned serious as he asked the most important question to Anastasia. Can you tell me why I, Azroth, did all of these things? From the things that happened until now, it is clear that everything was planned by him. Can you tell me the reason behind his action? Interesting places. Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard Anastasia, and after thinking for a moment, he nodded his head. He placed his hand on Anastasia's hand, and a silver light engulfed them. As their bodies started to disappear, Evan suddenly thought about another thing. Now that I think about it, I still don't have much information about the forbidden ground of Utopia. he said inwardly and glanced sideways. I will ask her about it later. Twitched and he asked in a deadpan voice. Don't tell me you completely forgot about the injury of that poor old man after coming out. Cedar coughed when he heard Evan and instantly shook his head. Of course, I didn't forget. Yup, he definitely forgot. Evan didn't believe Cedar's words and was sure that he had forgotten about Sylvan's injury after coming out of the tomb. With such a good grandchild, the future of that old man doesn't look bright. Evan silently clapped both his hands and prayed for Sylvan that he wouldn't suffer much in the future. So, did you get the thing you were looking for in the tomb of the ancients to heal Grandpa Sylvan? Evan asked after praying for the future of the old man. Cedar nodded his head when he heard Evan and took out a small bonsai-sized, white-colored plant from his storage ring. The plant was glowing with a hazy blue light, and a cherry-sized, red-colored fruit was growing on it. A world core plant. Anastasia raised an eyebrow when she saw the plant in Cedar's hand and spoke with a surprised look on her face. World core plant. Evan looked at the plant in confusion because he felt it looked somewhat similar to the world tree he had seen in Sylvan's cave. Seeing the confused look on Evan's face, Anastasia explained to him. The world core plant is a rank 4 treasure, but considering the conditions for its formation, it's even rarer than many rank 5 and some rank 6 treasures, Anastasia said and continued. The world core plant only grows in places where a rank 5 or rank 6 core evolver died. And the chances of its formation are less than 3%. Grows only in places where a rank 5 or rank 6 core evolver died. Evan was shocked when he heard Anastasia, but he soon remembered how Azeroth killed many rank 5 and rank 6 core evolvers to create the Tomb of the Ancient, so it wasn't surprising that Cedar found a world core plant in the tomb. But the question was, how did you find it? I'm sure this plant must have been in a hidden place, otherwise, people would have found it long ago, Evan asked Cedar with a curious look on his face. Cedar smiled when he heard Evan and took out a branch from his storage ring. The branch was just 50 centimeters long and was glowing with different colors of light. The branch of the world tree, huh? It's no surprise that you were able to find it since the branch of the world tree can sense the world core plant. Anastasia spoke with a look of understanding when she saw the glowing branch in Cedar's hand. Evan didn't know the relationship between the branch of the world tree and the world core plant, and honestly, he didn't care too much, so he didn't ask further about it and got back to the main question. So, this world core plant can heal Grandpa Sylvan's core, right? Does he just need to eat the fruit growing on it, or is there something more? Cedar scratched the back of his head when he heard Evan, and shook his head. Honestly, I don't know anything about that. He just told me to look for this plant. As for how to use it, we will have to ask him. Evan looked at Anastasia when he heard Cedar, asking if she knew anything about how this plant could heal an injured core. Seeing Evan looking at her, Anastasia explained in a calm voice. Normally, if the injuries to his core were not serious, he would have been able to heal them just by eating the fruit growing on the world core plant. But the injuries he sustained are not normal, and because it's been thousands of years since he received those injuries, it would be impossible for him to heal them just by eating the fruit. Anastasia paused after saying this and continued after a moment. However, if he uses the essence of the entire world core plant along with its fruit and some other rare herbs to create a core world pill, it wouldn't be difficult for him to heal his damaged core. Evan and the others listened carefully to Anastasia and a deep frown appeared on Cedar's face. What is the rank of this core world pill? He asked while trying to stay calm. It's a rank 5 pill, and one of the hardest pills to make among the rank 5 ones. Cedar's face turned gloomy when he heard Anastasia because even the best alchemist in the closed world of Drades was just a rank 3 one. Seeing Cedar's gloomy look, Evan patted him on the shoulder and walked outside of his house. Don't make that gloomy face. Since that old man asked you to bring the plant, he must have some kind of arrangement to make the core world pill. Hearing Evan, Cedar thought for a moment and nodded his head. He put away the world core plant and the branch of the world tree back into his storage ring and looked at Evan who was walking away. Let's go and meet him. I am sure that guy must be wondering if you were able to find the world core plant or not in the tomb. Evan said to Cedar and the others, and at the same time, he used his spiritual senses to talk to Octavius. Can you make this so-called world core pill? It's not easy to make this pill, Evan heard Octavius' thoughtful reply, but I should be able to make it if you can provide me with enough energy. Evan's mouth twitched when he heard Octavius talking about energy, and he asked in a dead voice. How much? Octavius was silent for a while as if he was calculating. After a full minute of silence, Evan finally heard his voice. Not much, I think 1.5 billion high-level essence stones would be enough. When Evan heard Octavius, he stopped walking for a second but soon continued to walk as if nothing had happened. He didn't reply to Octavius and directly cut his connection with him, not wanting to talk to him anymore. This guy is even more dangerous than the loan sharks, he thought to himself, but soon, he remembered he wasn't the one who needed to create the pill. I just hope that old man already has a solution to create the core world pill, otherwise, he might die of a heart attack after hearing about the amount of essence stones Octavius needs to create the pill. After leaving Evan's house, Orpal and other Drades went back to their home and only Cedar, Evan and Anastasia went to meet Sylvan. He is not here, Cedar said with a confused look on his face as he didn't find Sylvan in his cave where he usually stayed to take care of the world tree. He must be with Fox Guy Alaric, Anastasia said in a plain voice, knowing that both of them were old friends and likely partying somewhere since they hadn't met for a long time. Now that you mention it, who is that Fox? Evan suddenly asked, realizing that although he had seen Alaric after coming out of the tomb, he hadn't paid much attention to him at that time because he was thinking about other matters. You don't know him? Anastasia raised an eyebrow when she heard Evan, but soon a look of realization flashed across her face. It seems he did not awaken any memory related to him, she thought, and an amused smile appeared on her face. Well, considering how that fox used to annoy him, it makes sense that he did not awaken anything related to him. When Anastasia didn't say anything for a while, Cedar took the chance to explain about Alaric to Evan, as he had met him a few times in the past when he was with Sylvan. Evan was stunned when he heard that the foxy guy he saw yesterday was actually the overlord of the Dark Forest, a rank 6 monster. From his look, that guy seems like an old cunning fellow who would sell his son without blinking an eye, but he is actually the overlord of the Dark Forest. Evan thought and sighed inwardly. You really can't judge people by their appearance. Sneeze. Somewhere in the Dark Forest, Haruto, who was still watering the plants so that he wouldn't be forgotten in the future, suddenly sneezed. Is someone thinking about me? Haruto muttered as a small smile appeared on his face. Looks like watering the plants really works. Now I won't be forgotten by other people. Back inside the closed world of Drades, after not finding Sylvan in his usual place, Cedar took out his communication crystal and contacted him. But to his surprise, even after contacting him more than 5 times, the old man didn't answer. He must be knocked unconscious after drinking with that foxy guy all night, Anastasia said with a certain look on her face as if she was sure about her guess. Cedar's mouth couldn't help but twitch when he heard Anastasia, but he didn't say anything. Now that I think about it, who the hell is this woman? Cedar suddenly thought with a weird look on his face. At first, when he came out of the tomb, he thought she was with Alaric. Although after seeing what happened when Evan came out, he could tell that she somehow knew Evan, he didn't pay much attention to it at the time because his mind was focused on Carla's situation. Should I ask who this woman is and how she is related to Evan? Cedar thought to himself, but after taking a look at Anastasia's indifferent face, he decided to ask when he would be alone with Evan. I feel like if I ask about how she is related to Evan right now, my fragile mind that is already overloaded wouldn't be able to handle it. Let's go to the central hall. I think Grandpa Sylvan must be there, Cedar said after thinking for a moment. Are you sure he wouldn't be in a pub? Anastasia asked. Cedar sighed when he heard Anastasia and asked in a tired voice, why do you think he would be in a pub? It's because that foxy guy Alaric is a cheapskate, Anastasia said in a plain voice. Cheapskate? Both Evan and Cedar were taken aback when they heard Anastasia and looked at her in confusion. Yes, cheapskate, Anastasia nodded and explained. Although that guy is a ranked 6 core evolver and his wealth is enormous, he still wouldn't let go of a chance to drink free alcohol, so he must have taken that old man to a pub. Cedar was baffled when he heard Anastasia because he didn't think Alaric, whom he had seen a few times, was that kind of guy. But now that I think about it, every time he comes over, Grandpa would disappear for 2 or 3 days. Don't tell me it happens because they would continue to drink for a few days without stopping. Cedar suddenly thought, and his eyes twitched uncontrollably. To think that gentle-looking guy is this kind of man. You really can't judge people by their appearance, Cedar thought, feeling the same about Alaric as Evan inside. We should at least check out the central hall. If Grandpa is not there, then we can only wait for him to come back, Cedar said and flew away from there. Evan and Anastasia shrugged their shoulders when they heard him and followed after. Soon, they reached the central hall and entered without hesitation. Although the central hall was an important place, there was no one guarding it outside, as there was no one other than Drades in this closed world. As they entered the central hall and moved forward, all 3 of them felt the air was quite heavy, as if something serious was going on. Cedar led Anastasia and Evan towards the deeper area of the central hall and soon stopped in front of a room. As Cedar stopped in front of the room and opened its door, the sound of discussion reached their ears. So, demons really declared war against the Dragon Islands, huh? Evan heard Ashley's voice and saw Sylvan, Alaric, and a few more high-level Drades in the hall. Yes, war is inevitable unless Eldracar and Baphomet step in and stop it, Alaric said upon hearing Ashley. Declared war against the Dragon Islands. Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard Ashley and entered the room along with Anastasia and Cedar. The gaze of the people in the room shifted towards them, but no one looked surprised upon seeing them. Well, considering the nature of demons and the way that guy blew up their capital, it would have been strange if they didn't declare war against the Dragon Islands. Anastasia said in a plain voice, as if she had already expected it. What are you talking about? Evan asked Anastasia because he didn't know what these people were talking about. So he just caused chaos and disappeared without explaining anything to him, Anastasia sighed when she heard Evan and explained to him what happened before he came out of the tomb. Evan was dumbfounded when he heard a mid-level ranked 6 light dragon blow away the entire demon capital in the name of Eldracar, and how it caused a war between the demons and dragons. Hearing Anastasia, it was obvious he immediately understood who the dragon was who slandered the Dragon Islands. At the same time, he finally understood what Azeroth meant by his last words when Eldracar and Baphomet jumped inside the void space. They will regret entering the void space. Evan repeated Azeroth's words and, remembering how Eldracar and Baphomet were acting cocky when he met them in the tomb, he couldn't hold himself back and burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. I was thinking it would take me quite some time to increase my strength and teach those 2 a good lesson, but to think Azeroth already screwed them over. Evan thought and gave Azeroth a thumbs up inwardly. Sylvan, Alaric, Cedar, and others present in the central hall looked at Evan in confusion, not understanding why he was laughing. Only Anastasia rolled her eyes when she heard Evan's laughter, as she was well aware of the identity of the light dragon who caused all the commotion. To think he would revive that guy to sow disorder among the demons and dragons. Anastasia sighed at Azeroth's antics, feeling helpless. She thought he was the only one who could throw Utopia into chaos like this. Before it was the Eternal Night event, and now this. She glanced sideways at Evan and felt happy that at least his current personality was different and he didn't think about destruction and chaos all the time. Why are you laughing? Sylvan asked with a weird look on his face. Alaric had already told him about Evan's real identity, explaining that he was not the son of the Shadow Monarch but the Shadow Monarch himself. Sylvan was stunned when Alaric told him everything, but like any sane person, he didn't believe the fox's words. Alaric was irritated when Sylvan didn't believe him, so he chose the method that always works when you need to convince people. Yes, he beat Sylvan into a pulp until he believed him and started to scream that Evan was the Shadow Monarch. Although his method was rough, Alaric didn't feel guilty about beating his old friend. In fact, he enjoyed it, as it had been a long time since he had the chance to do so. Pity he believed my words after just a few minutes of violence, otherwise. Alaric thought while looking at Sylvan with a look of dissatisfaction on his face. Sylvan, who had just asked Evan why he was laughing, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine and noticed Alaric looking at him with dissatisfaction, as if irritated that he didn't satisfy him. Why does it sound so wrong? This bastard, he must be thinking about beating me once again. Sylvan thought with a grim look on his face when he noticed Alaric's expression and wanted to cry. He felt his luck had been very bad recently. First, he nearly got his ass spanked by Anastasia, then the tomb collapsed and the news about Carla came out, and now his cheap friend wanted to beat him for no reason. I swear I will cut off one of his tails after knocking him out with strong alcohol, Sylvan thought, and started to form a plan to take revenge against the foxy bastard. Back to the topic, Evan stopped laughing when he heard Sylvan's question and said with a grin on his face. If you are thinking about that void goblin and that cheap demon monarch, then you don't have to, because they won't be coming back anytime soon, Evan said in a light voice. He knew both of them would eventually come out of the tomb, but it would definitely take quite some time. The reason Evan believed Baphomet and Eldracar would be able to come out was because of the way Azeroth acted in the tomb. In Evan's opinion, if Azeroth wanted to, he could have killed Eldracar and Baphomet in the tomb without much trouble, especially after he stopped time using his temporal pause authority. But Azeroth didn't kill them. Instead, he threw them into the void space, which means he must have had another objective. Although Evan wasn't sure what Azeroth wanted to do, he had a feeling that he just wanted to trap them for some time to stir trouble between the dragons and demons. Void Goblin and Cheap Demon Monarch. Sylvan and the others were taken aback when they heard Evan. Only Anastasia nodded, agreeing with Evan's choice to call Eldracar a Void Goblin instead of a Void Dragon. Why are you so sure that both of them won't be appearing anytime soon? Ashley asked with a frown on her face, not understanding where Evan was getting his confidence. Evan smiled when he heard Ashley and said something that shocked everyone. I am sure, because both of them are currently trapped in the collapsed tomb of the Ancient, and it would be impossible for them to come out anytime soon. What? Hearing Evan, Sylvan and the others exclaimed simultaneously and looked at him with shocked expressions. So it was really the work of those two bastards. Anastasia's eyes narrowed dangerously when she heard Evan. After seeing the actions of the Light Dragon, she had already guessed that the trouble Evan had encountered in the tomb, which forced him to use his Authority Realm Guardian, must be somehow related to demons and dragons. At first, it was just a guess, but now it was a certainty. I was thinking about ignoring that Void Goblin since I don't really care about the past, but it seems he really wants to die. Anastasia thought inwardly as some plans started to form in her mind. What do you mean by they are trapped in the collapsed tomb? Alaric asked in a serious voice. If what Evan said was true, he would have to make some plans to benefit from this war. I won't go into details since it's complicated, but I can tell you that the tomb collapsed because of those two idiots, and now they are trapped there for an indefinite amount of time. Sylvan and Alaric looked at each other upon hearing Evan. Although they wanted to know how those two got trapped in the tomb, they didn't ask because being able to trap two peak ranked 6 core evolvers was not a small matter, and it must be Evan's secret. Instead of thinking about these useless things, both Sylvan and Alaric were currently considering how they could take advantage of this situation. By the way, we came here because Cedar successfully found a world core plant in the tomb. Evan suddenly said, and Sylvan's body stiffened. Cedar didn't wait for Sylvan to say anything and took out the white-colored plant from his storage ring, making the room fall completely silent. Evan smiled slightly when he saw Sylvan's shocked face and asked with a chuckle. So, do you have an alchemist to process this thing? If not, I know a loan shark who can help you. So, can you tell me more about this loan shark? Sylvan asked Evan with an awkward look on his face. Hearing Sylvan, Evan didn't answer his question and just stared at him with a speechless expression. Even Alaric, Anastasia, and Ashley, who were standing beside Evan, stared at the old man with disdain. This shameless guy, he really wants us to ignore what happened earlier, Evan thought while taking a deep breath and glanced behind him. Upon looking back, He saw Cedar lying unconscious near the world tree, with some of his bones broken but slowly healing under the effect of a healing potion. Just 1 minute ago, when Cedar took out the world core plant, Sylvan was so excited that he forgot to control his strength and jumped towards Cedar like a monkey to snatch the plant from him as if he was afraid Cedar wouldn't give it to him. Since he did not control his strength properly, the action of snatching the plant generated a powerful wind pressure that blew Cedar away, slamming him into the wall of the central hall. Because of the powerful impact and shock, Cedar didn't even understand what happened before he lost consciousness. Once Cedar lost consciousness, Sylvan realized his mistake and immediately asked Ashley to teleport them back to his cave, where he placed Cedar near the world tree to help him recover faster. There are many things that I want to say, but you know what? Just forget it. The serious image I had of you is completely ruined, Evan said with a shake of his head and decided to get over with this topic so he could leave. Before I tell you about the lone shark, can you tell me what your plan is regarding this world core plant? I am not a lone shark. Evan completely ignored Octavius, who was screaming and focused on Sylvan. Hearing Evan, Sylvan pointed towards Alaric. I am planning to give world core plant to this foxy bastard. Evan raised an eyebrow when he heard Sylvan and looked at him in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Seeing Evan's confused look, Alaric explained. To heal his core, he needs a pill called the Core World Pill. It is a rank 5 pill, so it is impossible for him to create it with the current situation of the Drades. I am planning to use my connections to help him refine this pill. I see. Evan nodded with understanding and asked the most important question. Is there a chance that the alchemist you are going to use might fail in refinement, and the world core plant would go to waste? Sylvan sighed upon hearing Evan and nodded with a bitter expression. Rank 5 pills are not easy to refine, so there is a high chance the alchemist might fail. Honestly, he was conflicted about whether to use the plant to refine the pill or directly use it. Although he wouldn't be able to get back to rank 6 without the Core World Pill, his strength would still considerably increase if he just ate the fruit of the plant and refined its essence. What about you? Are you confident you can refine it without failing? Don't compare me with those trashes. Octavius replied in a sneering voice. As long as it is a rank 5 pill, I can refine it with 100% guarantee. I would have become a rank 6 alchemist long ago if not for the low rank of my core when I was alive. Good. Evan ignored Octavius' prideful boasts and looked back at Sylvan. My lone shark can refine the Core World Pill with 100% guarantee, but as his name suggests, it will cost a lot. What? Sylvan, Alaric, and Ashley were stunned when they heard Evan. Anastasia, on the other hand, had a thoughtful look on her face. So, he found the soul of that old man, she thought, and her lips arched upwards. Since he found his soul, it means he also got the prismatic flame. Who is this lone shark you are talking about? Sylvan asked in a trembling voice as the matter of the Core World Pill was very important to him. It's time for you to show up. Rank 5 Octavius, I choose you. What's with that weird way of calling? Octavius grumbled when he heard Evan, but he still showed up in front of them. When Octavius suddenly appeared in his spirit form, Alaric and Sylvan were taken aback and looked at Evan with a questioning gaze, waiting for an explanation. Evan shrugged when he saw their expressions and gave them a brief explanation about Octavius' identity. When they heard that the spirit in front of them was Octavius, both Alaric and Sylvan were stunned. They knew about him as he was quite notorious in Utopia a few thousand years ago for killing many innocent people through his weird experiments. I know this guy is questionable, but you don't have to worry as his soul essence is under my control, so he can't lie to me, Evan said when he noticed Sylvan's suspicious look towards Octavius. If he wants to live and get a new body one day, he wouldn't dare to play tricks on us. Although Sylvan was still suspicious of Octavius, he believed Evan's words and nodded. He then asked what Octavius needed to create the pill. All the pill ingredients and around 1.5 billion high-level essence stones, Octavius replied. Thud. The moment Octavius finished speaking, a thudding sound rang out, and Sylvan fainted from shock. Evan had already anticipated this reaction, so he wasn't surprised. He just summoned Aqua, who sprayed a jet of cold water on Sylvan. Whoa! Sylvan instantly came back to his senses and jumped to his feet because of the cold water. What happened? He asked in a confused voice after waking up. Nothing much. You were attacked by the heavy price of the medicines, Evan said in a plain voice. Hearing the words, heavy price, Sylvan remembered the amount Octavius had mentioned and nearly fainted again. Can you lower the price a bit? He asked Octavius with a hopeful look. What do you mean by lower the price? Do you think the essence stones could help me with my current body? I am asking for so many essence stones because I need a large amount of energy to perform alchemy in my current situation, Octavius said in an annoyed voice because they were acting as if he was asking for essence stones for his own use. Upon hearing that Octavius needed the essence stones to perform alchemy, Sylvan was taken aback. But soon he remembered that the person in front of him was just a spirit without a real body. Although it's not impossible to take out 1.5 billion essence stones, but still, Sylvan felt conflicted about using so many essence stones on himself. Seeing Sylvan's conflicted look, Ashley felt annoyed and wanted to beat him. Why are you thinking for so long? Do you think those essence stones are more important than your health? Besides, you don't know since you never leave this cave, but the storage vault is full of essence stones because of the essence stone mines. So stop thinking so much and take out the ingredients needed to refine the pill. Sylvan was stunned when he heard Ashley, but upon seeing her fierce eyes demanding that he take out all the ingredients, he immediately handed her the world core plant and other materials, afraid she would lecture him if he delayed. After receiving the ingredients, Ashley didn't wait and asked Octavius to come with her since she knew he would need an isolated place to create the pill. How many days will it take you to finish the pill? Evan asked when he saw Octavius leaving with Ashley. 10 days at most, Octavius replied in a flat voice without turning back and soon disappeared along with Ashley. Once Octavius and Ashley left, Evan looked at Cedar who was still unconscious one last time and decided to leave as well. Well, since the problem of the pill is solved, I'll see you guys later, he said and was about to leave, but Alaric stopped him. Can you stay for a while? I want to ask you something. What do you want to talk about? Evan asked Alaric as he sat in a chair, looking at the fox with a curious expression. Now this guy is giving me the vibe of a Japanese old man. He thought as he watched Alaric preparing tea for them. Anastasia was sitting beside him while Sylvan and Alaric were in front of him. There was a table between them, and Alaric was preparing tea on it. Alaric didn't immediately answer Evan's question. Instead, he first prepared the tea and poured everyone a cup. Thanks, Evan said, taking the teacup Alaric handed him and sipping it. Evan raised an eyebrow after taking a sip because, although the taste of the tea was normal, he could feel a strange energy in it refining his world essence and increasing its density. Even the world essence he had absorbed after eating the stew Anastasia made was being refined at a very fast speed. To think this cheapskate would take out such good tea. Evan heard Anastasia muttering and saw Sylvan nodding his head as if he was also stunned by Alaric's action. Alaric didn't care about Sylvan and Anastasia's sarcasm and spoke to Evan after taking a sip of the tea. Do you have any plan regarding the war that is about to start between the Gehenna Empire and the Dragon Islands? Evan was surprised when he heard Alaric and asked in a confused voice, "Why are you asking me this question?" Alaric sighed and said while looking at him, "It's because although I am not clear about the entire picture, I am sure everything that is happening is related to you in one way or another. And before you ask why I am sure about this, it's actually very clear," Alaric said and continued. "The light dragon that destroyed the demon capital came out of the tomb. Then earlier, you said Eldracar and Baphomet are trapped inside the collapsed tomb. The tomb actually collapsed a few minutes before you came out, but even though the tomb collapsed, you were still able to come out successfully, which means you had a certain level of control over it. Since you had a certain level of control over the tomb, I think it was you who sent out that light dragon to destroy the demon capital to sow disorder between demons and dragons and, at the same time, using your control over the tomb, you trapped Eldracar and Baphomet inside it." Evan was a little surprised when he heard Alaric. Although it was not hard to guess what he just said, he was still impressed that Alaric thought about all of this in just a few minutes. After all, it had only been a few minutes since he told them about Eldracar and Baphomet being trapped in the tomb. Well, what can I say? As expected from a fox, Evan thought inwardly and shook his head. You are not entirely right, since it wasn't me who did all of these things, but let's forget about that. As for your question about whether I have any plans regarding this war, the answer is no. I don't plan to do anything about the war between the demons and dragons. What kind of plan could he have about the war? Let's not forget that just a few minutes ago, he didn't even know that dragons and demons were about to start a war. Even if he had known, he wouldn't have done anything because he was still just a rank 2 core evolver. It would be foolish of him to try to meddle in the war of two giant factions, especially since he knew his identity had already been exposed. Most of the factions in Utopia already knew about what he did in the tomb, and they wouldn't let him go if he left the hidden world of the Drades and got caught by them. So you really don't have any plan regarding this war? Alaric was surprised when he heard Evan's answer, because he thought that since Evan was the one who caused all this chaos, he must have something in mind. Yeah, I don't want to get involved in this stupid farce. I already have a lot of troubles, and I don't want to increase them even more. A lot of troubles? What is troubling you? Anastasia raised an eyebrow when she heard Evan and asked him in a confused voice. Evan looked at Anastasia with dead eyes and asked in a speechless voice. Don't you know, my identity was exposed when I was in the tomb, and now almost every faction in Utopia knows that I am somehow related to the Shadow Monarch and looking for me. Anastasia, Sylvan, and Alaric were stunned when they heard Evan and looked at him with their eyes wide open. What? Don't tell me you don't know what happened in the tomb? Evan asked with a weird look on his face when he saw their shocked expressions. Haven't Cedar and the others told them about what happened in the tomb? Evan thought, but then he remembered that Cedar was busy in the secret area of the tomb collecting the World Core plant, while the rest of the Drades stayed in the first layer of the tomb during the entire time because they were just rank 1 core evolvers. The only Drade who entered the second layer other than Cedar was Carla, but she was killed by Zorda. Because the other Drades were in the first layer and didn't go to the second layer, they did not know what happened there, so naturally, Sylvan and the others also didn't receive any information about it. Evan sighed when he thought about it and told them how he killed most of the people from the other factions in the tomb and how his identity was exposed in the process. Sylvan and Alaric were stunned to learn that Evan had practically massacred people from every faction. Anastasia was curious about the reason why he killed them, but since Evan didn't speak about the reason, she could only make some random guesses. It's really quite a big problem. Since they know about your identity, I am 100% certain that most of the factions will try their best to search for you, Alaric said with a frown on his face. Right, even though some of the major factions' attention will shift towards the war between the Gehenna Empire and Dragon Islands, they won't give up on you. Especially after you massacred so many people in the tomb, Sylvan also nodded his head in agreement. When Anastasia heard Sylvan talking about shifting their attention towards the war, her eyes lit up and a bold idea came to her mind. Actually, I recently received a piece of information from my new vampire slave, she said while looking at Alaric and Sylvan with a cold smile. If we play our cards right, not only will all of us benefit greatly, but we will also be able to increase the scale of this war to the point where most of the major factions will have no choice but to ignore your existence for the time being. Evan quietly flew towards his house, thinking about what Anastasia had proposed to Sylvan and Alaric. This is complete madness, he thought, feeling his heartbeat increase just thinking about what those three were planning to do. If anyone else finds out what they are planning, it will be a disaster, Evan muttered and shook his head, deciding to not think about it anymore as he was also part of their plan. He leisurely flew towards his house, feeling the cold breeze brushing past his cheek, making him forget about the madness they were about to do a few days later. Evan was going back alone because Anastasia had left the closed world of the Drades, saying she needed to contact her vampire slave to prepare for the things they needed to execute their plan and would come back after a few hours. 1 month, Evan muttered in a low voice, recalling the time frame Anastasia, Sylvan, and Alaric had set for their plan. I wonder what kind of chaos it will cause throughout Utopia, but one thing I am sure of is that if this plan works successfully, the Gehenna Empire will be Phuket. Soon, Evan returned to his house, but instead of going inside, he walked towards the river flowing down from the top of the mountain and sat down near it. He took a deep breath and slumped down on the grass, feeling quite relaxed after a long while, as he was stressed after spending 3 months inside the tomb that was filled with dangers. As he looked at the drifting clouds, he started to think about what he needed to do next. The most important thing for me now is to increase my understanding of void energy so that I can become a rank 3 core evolver in the future. At the same time, I need to get more familiar with the usage of the primordial shadow energy. I can ignore the rank of my core for the time being, as it will continue to increase on its own as long as Anastasia provides me high-level food. Just when Evan was relaxing, thinking about his next course of action, he suddenly felt an energy wave emerging from deep within his soul. Feeling the energy wave, Evan immediately sat up as he recognized it. "Alora," he said in a surprised voice, and used the psychic soul realm to enter his soul space. Upon entering his soul space, he saw the origin essence that had been circling around the halberd of destruction was completely absorbed by it, and it was releasing golden waves of energy. Although the energy waves were filled with the intent of destruction, they didn't damage his soul space. Instead, he felt his spiritual power condensing and becoming more pure. The halberd continued to release energy waves and stopped only after 5 minutes. The range of my spiritual senses increased by around 200 kilometers because of the purification of my spiritual energy, Evan muttered with a surprised look on his face, not expecting the range of his spiritual senses to increase even more. Suddenly, a bright golden light flashed and the jet-black halberd hovering in his soul space appeared in front of him. Evan was taken aback when the halberd suddenly appeared in front of him, but before he could react, the halberd transformed into a small red-haired girl with emerald green eyes. "Father!" Alora wrapped her arms around Evan's chest and shouted while sticking to him like glue. Evan sighed in relief when he heard Alora's voice, but his expression froze when he looked at her. What's wrong with her body? He thought to himself as he noticed her body was somewhat illusionary and he could see through her. Looking at her transparent body, he thought it might be because he was in the soul space, so he immediately stopped using the psychic soul realm skill. He opened his eyes outside and immediately summoned the halberd of destruction using his connection with it. As he summoned the halberd, a destructive black golden light flashed, and a 3-meter-long halberd appeared in his hand. But upon looking at the halberd, Evan was not happy because even now, the weapon in his hand looked illusionary as if it was not real. Evan took a deep breath to stay calm and called in a soft voice, "Alora." As soon as he spoke, the halberd in his hands flashed and turned into Alora, who looked around curiously, seemingly wondering where she was. "Father, did we leave that place?" she asked in a curious voice, noticing the environment around her was completely different from the tomb of the ancient. Evan nodded his head when he heard Alora and patted her head. "Yes, we are no longer in that place." He wanted to ask her what was wrong with her body, but before he could, he felt a surge of information appearing within his mind. Evan frowned when the information appeared, but he closed his eyes for a moment and quickly organized it. "So that's how it is." Evan frowned after organizing the information and looked at Alora with a thoughtful expression. According to the information he just received, the halberd he carried out of the tomb was not the real halberd of destruction, instead, it was a replica created by one of halberd's abilities. To allow Evan to take Alora with him, Azroth transformed Alora's spirit into this replica. Since this halberd was not her original vessel, her body appeared illusionary because she couldn't use her full power. However, this replica was connected with the true halberd of destruction still inside the tomb. Since it was drawing energy from the real halberd to maintain its form, the real halberd would run out of energy within 6 years, and the ceiling formation would collapse. So that's why Azroth told me to become as strong as possible in the next 6 years. Evan thought inwardly, but he didn't care too much because as long as there was nothing wrong with Elora, he didn't mind. Just when Evan was still deep in his thoughts, Elora looked at him and asked something that shocked him. "Father, where is my sister? Father, where is my sister?" Evan was baffled when he heard Elora and looked at her with a speechless expression. "You have a sister. Didn't you say I have a sister?" Elora asked instead of answering him. "When did I say you had a sister? You said it when you left me at that place. You told me you were leaving because my sister needed help. That mother fu cur is really a child deceiver." Evan cursed Azeroth in his mind and didn't know what to say. Although he felt Azeroth was just deceiving Elora, he still asked her. "Have you ever seen? No, have you ever heard about your sister before I talked about her to you? Before you told me about her, I didn't know I had a sister. Only after you told me did I find out that I had a sister who got separated from me long ago. Just what kind of fucked up story did that guy tell her?" Evan really started to feel that Azeroth was a professional kidnapper who used to deceive simple innocent children. I hope he was just **TTING because I feel like if he was telling the truth, then he must have turned her sister into a weapon spirit or something similar. Evan prayed inwardly and hoped that Azeroth was just messing with Elora. And she didn't have a sister. He took a deep breath to stop thinking about this matter and stood up while carrying Elora in his arms. "Let's talk about your sister some other time. For now, let me show you around our new home," Evan said and started to show Elora around his home. Elora had spent most of her time in the Tomb of the Ancient, so she was quite excited when Evan showed her around. Over the next few hours, Evan walked around the closed world of the Dryads with Elora, showing her different places. Although there was nothing spectacular in the closed world of the Dryads, Elora was still excited because she had been trapped in the tomb for a few thousand years. After showing Elora many places, Evan came back to his house in the evening. Upon entering the house, he noticed Anastasia was still not back, but he didn't think too much about it and lay down on the sofa. "Father, where is Uncle Biscuit?" When Evan lay down, Elora came beside him and asked in confusion. Evan was taken aback when he heard Elora and wondered what he should say. After a moment of thinking, an idea suddenly came into his mind and he said with a smile on his face. "Your Uncle Biscuit went out to see his mother. She is seriously ill, so it will take him some time before he returns." "Oh," Elora nodded her head in understanding but looked disappointed. Seeing her disappointed look, Evan asked curiously, "Are you missing him?" Hearing Evan, Elora nodded and rubbed her tummy. "I am hungry." Evan was stunned when he heard Elora and stared at her with a speechless look on his face. So she is missing him because she is hungry. Evan thought with a dead look on his face, remembering it was Biscuit who used to cook for Elora in the tomb. "Do I need to cook tonight?" he wondered, hoping that his free high-end meal ticket aka Anastasia would come back soon. Just when Evan was thinking about cooking something simple, he felt an aura approaching. "Ah, she came back at the right time. I remember we didn't finish all the stew last night. Since she stored it inside her core world, it should still be fresh." Evan thought to himself and dismissed the idea of cooking something simple. When you can eat one of the best stews made from the meat of a rank 4 monster, who would want to eat simple roasted meat with a little salt over it? Soon, Evan heard footsteps and the door of the living room opened. "I am Ba." Anastasia was in a happy mood after relaying her plan to her slave, but the moment she opened the door and entered the living room, she froze. Her black eyes met with Elora's emerald green eyes, and for a moment, she felt as if she was looking at something terrifying that could destroy anything in its path. The feeling was fleeting and somewhat illusionary, but Anastasia knew it was not an illusion. She looked at Evan, who was lying beside Elora as if asking who she was. Evan raised an eyebrow when he saw Anastasia's confused look because, in his opinion, she should be aware of Elora. I'm sure she knew the Tomb of the Ancient was a sealing ground, so why doesn't she know about Elora, who used to be the core of the sealing formation? Evan thought inwardly and a sudden possibility came to his mind. Could it be that she just knows the tomb of the ancient was a sealing ground but doesn't know anything about the true eldritch energy source that was sealed there, and that it was Elora who was the core of the formation? Father, who is she? Elora asked in a timid voice while moving closer to Evan because she felt this woman was dangerous. Father. Anastasia staggered backwards as if she had just heard something shocking and looked at Elora with a stunned look on her face. Evan's mouth twitched when he saw Anastasia's dramatic reaction, but instead of solving the misunderstanding, he decided to mess with her by fueling it even further. He sat up and placed Elora on his lap. While patting her head, he looked at Anastasia and said in a tender voice, "Anastasia, meet my daughter Elora. She is the result of love between me and Sai." Evan didn't speak further as he felt saying, "She is the result of love between Azroth and his kidnapping hobby," would be very strange. But when Anastasia saw him suddenly stop talking while showing an emotional face, she felt he was thinking about Elora's mother and didn't want to talk about it. She pointed her finger toward Elora, who was leaning back on Evan's chest, and her body trembled. Suddenly, her eyes turned sharp. She immediately appeared before Evan and said something that made him regret his decision to mess with her. "You come with me. We are going to make a baby as well." Thanks for watching, guys. In the next video we will catch up with the Necromancer of the Shadows and continue Affinity Chaos, so stay tuned. Do subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video.